All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Excess Succeed, the show where Gearface continually manages to, despite all the odds, rope another expert in with promises of fame and riches to teach him an Exceed character. Today, I'm sitting down with DarkSightBlind to talk about Phonon from Undernight. DarkSightBlind, thank you so much for being on my show. I don't actually have any fame and riches for you.
That's fine. Yeah, it happens sometimes. Just playing is enough.
Oh, wow. Wow, man, this is way easier than I thought it was going to be. Here I was
Yeah, we
expecting.
try.
Yeah, all right, cool. If only all my guests could be so understanding of the lack of actual upside they're getting from this experience.
Yeah.
Uh, you know how it is.
Hmm.
So, quick disclaimer before we get started for everybody watching. I guess two disclaimers. Number one is we're going to be talking about playing to win on this show. Um, Exceed is a fun game, and you can play it for fun, and I encourage you to play it for fun. And if the lines we discuss on this show do not sound fun or don't sound interesting to you, play the ones that do sound interesting to you. Um, you'll keep your friends better, but you'll also play the game longer, and in the long run, that's going to make you a better player overall anyway. So play the game the way you want to play it. That doesn't mean that uh, the way that we're going to play or discuss playing is not fun, but it might not be to your taste, and that's fine. Number two is we're going to be talking about strategy in a way that might lean towards sounding a little absolute. We're going to say things like, this is always correct, never do this, stuff like that. Um, Remember that although uh, Dark's opinion is very informed, it is just one perspective on how to play this character, and it doesn't have to be yours. If you have a better line, or you think that we've underrepresented um, or undervalued some part of Phonon's kit, please let me know. I want to hear more about this character, and turn this into a conversation.
As do I,
I'm
of
stuck.
course, because
Yeah,
it's one of my favorite characters, and if I learn something new, even better.
yeah, absolutely. I feel like season 6 in general is a little bit underexplored and underdeveloped, so there's a decent chance that even with characters that have been kind of mined a little bit more thoroughly, we might be overlooking some stuff. So I would love to hear that from people. But yeah, so that's kind of the bookkeeping up front. Dark, tell me about Phonon.
Conan is, well, if you just look at her basic ability, it's very strong, right?
Hmm.
Uh so action strike, if it's not the turn after a strike, +2 power, otherwise +1. I actually like to explain that in reverse, where if it's a turn after a strike, you're +1. It makes more sense.
Right,
Otherwise, you're +2. Just
right,
that alone, if say her whole deck was full of normals, would be incredibly strong,
sure,
right? Your sweeps are break sweeps on offense. Your grass can break grass combos, right? Like certain things that might have 3 guard that are meant to eat a grasp.
yep,
Um, and just that extra chip damage overall is very strong. Now, if you're looking at just a quick glance at her kit here, there is not a single number on here above 3 in terms of power.
right,
That's where the balance kind of comes out. Um, and people initially think of her as, if you've played Under Night, she has a sweep that hits the entire screen, right?
yeah,
Like she is definitely a zoner in that regard. I find her more as the joke I like to make is she plays the range 3 mix up at range 4.
okay,
Um, which just means that she likes playing one step out of range. Because
right.
if you get to someone like, say, New, who will just absolutely destroy you at range 4, she's definitely going to want to move in on that.
Right. So
Um,
she's not like a dedicated full time. She didn't get like her university degree in zoning, but uh she's better at it than most characters are.
Correct. Yeah, she
Gotcha.
really loves playing at range 3 and 4.
Right.
Um, but then I'll get into certain things where like 5 gets a little dicey, and she has a lot of things that might push into range 4 or range 5. But the upside to that is how many other characters are really good at range 5?
Sure.
Not
And
that many.
they spend their turn moving back in. Now they didn't spend time attacking. Now you can use your ability again and you have
And
the
now
plus
you're
two
at plus
power.
2.
Gotcha.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Uh, good.
quick question sort of bookkeeping wise before we really get into stuff. So if I look at, I don't know, like where's sweep? if I look at this, for example, and I look at the boost on this, just
Hmm.
defense, the now strike boost, uh, like most Under Night characters where their character ability, all of their character abilities involve an action. That means that if I'm doing something that causes me to strike, I'm not taking that action, correct? I can't play just defense, now strike, and use my ability at the same time. It's an either or, correct?
Correct, correct. And I think the bigger one, if you're looking at it, would be on, say, one that you're going to see more often would be mix up on Spike in this
On
season.
Spike, sure, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Where
so,
a lot of times you want to get into that step range, especially because if we flip
right,
her over
yeah.
here.
She has something similar.
Correct. So if, say, we'll just use an example, he's come into range, range two,
Sure,
and
he's over here.
right, and so he struck in that. He used something to move in. Now Phonon can't do that. Like, she can't use it. She might be on this side, but she can't do that. So mix up would
Right,
be a thing where you go into Ryu's really unpreferred range of three, where Phonon definitely has an advantage against Ryu in that regard.
right.
That's where, but we can get into that, more. But to answer your question fully, yes, if you boost, like with most season 6 characters, like you said, you will not get whatever special action is going on.
Right. You need to declare that you are using your character ability on the strike, and there can't really be any other strike trigger that makes you strike, because then you're not using your ability. Okay, cool.
Correct. So that's the trade off there. Yeah, for sure.
Right.
And none of her boosts have now strike on them,
Okay, that's good to
which is a
know.
very common thing in season 6,
Yeah,
especially when you look at like Wagner and Lynn. And that's, I think all of her boosts actually have now strike on them, but that's kind of what her
pretty
kit is
much.
designed
Yeah,
to do.
pretty much. She boosts and strikes with the action compression as kind of her whole theme.
Correct. Yeah, she's almost like a proto season 7 character.
Sure. Yeah, I can
If
see
you want
that.
to look at it like, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so with Phonon though, that is one of the big things is to, like, there are a lot of times where you want to boost. There are a lot of times where sometimes if your opponent prepares on their turn, that means they don't have an answer. Did they draw an answer? Who knows? You could then also prepare on your turn because you put them into a bad position, or you set yourself up for a better position with a lot of these boosts. But
Right.
we can definitely get into that.
Right.
One thing to note, if we're getting into our attacks here, is she actually has 4 copies of this card in her
Okay.
deck. And if you just look at this card, it's range 1 to 4, speed 5, which in of itself is very strong.
Sure. Yeah. Above curve projectile uh, at 4 is not bad.
Right. And then on top of that, it has push 1.
Yep.
So even at range 3 on offense, just
Yep.
as itself, it beats every other range 3 mix up, at least
Yep.
in terms of normals.
Yep.
You push out sweep, you push out spike, you beat out assault. Focus doesn't hit, which you wouldn't be using. Which focus, I will say, is something that I can get into later. Focus is very different against Phonon because she has a lot of pushes and pulls in her kit. That's kind of what
Yeah.
what her thing is.
So you might
Um,
be using the focus to mitigate that on defense rather than to hit back necessarily.
Correct. A lot of times I've kind of, because I play in person a lot,
Mhm.
much more than online, and a lot of people locally have learned to just, a lot of times they'll use it on turn 1, uh,
Okay.
just to not get moved into range. Because one of our openers is, if I go, if I have first, phone on with first turn is very strong because she just auto has this +2 power.
Right. It is not the turn after a strike because it's the first turn of the game.
Correct.
Right.
So the mix up there is Phonon can, uh, she can use pretty much anything in her kit will hit. You also threaten a power 7 dive.
Yep. Just
Um,
automatically, which would beat their sweep.
Correct, which would beat their sweep. But the counter to that is they can throw focus and then you trade.
Yep.
And then focus is just also really good into her other attacks. So, like, say, would you like this tuning satisfaction is just really good on your opener. Because it's speed 5, it's typically going to beat pretty much anything else besides like a long range guarded fireball. Um, Something like, low tiger shot, but if they're using that early, I probably would use the dive instead against like
Sure.
Sagat.
Sure.
Um, which is, it just creates that mix up. But so the advantage here is almost literal. So I have 2 of these in my opening hand. I throw this. I now push you to 5, and now I have an advantage.
Yep.
Which, for most people, just being here now, I can't hit with this other tuning satisfaction.
Right.
But now I could do this and I could boost or I could prepare. I just put you in a spot where chances are you don't really have an option.
Right. Okay. So and the time that they're spending getting back in is time that you're building your economy or getting ready to use your ability again or all the various other things that you want to be doing when you're not striking.
Correct. Yeah. Well,
Okay.
my general game plan, this is just me, when I'm playing Phonon, it typically is I try to make my opponent's turn as difficult as possible. Because
Okay.
I know on my turn, I always have +1 or +2 power.
Yep.
My turn is always generally going to be at least okay,
Right.
right? If I can take the power away from my opponent's turn, I'm winning.
Okay. And if you are striking as Phonon on your turn, are you basically just always using your character ability?
There's really no reason not to,
Okay.
in very specific circumstances, which I think would bleed too much information. So we can get into this, which is her DP.
Okay.
This has a range of X, which is equal to its power. So if we're at range 1 and I use
Oh,
my
sure.
ability, I can't actually hit.
Right. So
So
I, as your opponent, I see you not using your ability, and I go, "Huh, I wonder what that is."
I should,
Looks,
then you just
l-
throw a grasp and I cry,
yeah,
right?
looks at Kit. Oh, okay, it's
Right.
probably that.
Right. Unless you're playing, a 5 head move and you're actually baiting out their grasp with your grasp or something
Sure,
similar.
sure.
But at that point, why not just throw a power 4 or 5 grasp?
Right.
I will say this attack on EX is incredibly strong.
Oh
And the
yeah.
reason for
So
that is,
so
we're
so
here.
it's a it pushes out sweep, right? It's a DP
Yeah.
that
It's on
pushes to
EX,
your
it's an I
range.
effectively. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sure,
Uh,
because you if you're doing it on your turn especially, it can be even longer range.
Well, on my turn, on my turn, I can hit you from here,
Right.
just base. And then if we have boosts out, I can go third. Now that's the other thing is with Phonon, her boosts are very good,
Okay.
which is saying something because her action is also very good. So even just the boost on this, you get your +2 power. That means so say we're in a situation where like you're striking all the time. I think you've used a lot of things. I can boost this, and now I have my action on your turn,
Sure. And
which
if
means
if I pass the turn back to you, then you use your action, you have +4.
and now I can absolutely crush you.
Sure.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the big thing, it's funny we have Ryu out. The boost on this card here, um, if I initiate it, I get +2 speed, otherwise it's +2 power. Hit, I may return this to my hand. Now, typically, this is used as like a range fixer because if I hit you
Hmm.
and then I return it to my hand, I no longer have that power. Um, but if we get into a spot where, like, say, okay, I push you to here on opener, and then my second act, with my advantage, I now boost this. I now have things that will hit you on your turn. At least at speed 4, like I could hit you with this one here,
Right.
which would just knock you back even further and just cause you a nightmare. Or,
Right.
say Ryu takes his action to move in. Now I start my turn effectively with Wave the Warrior, right? I'm now +2 speed, +2 power because I will
Right.
use my action with +2 speed.
With your action, yeah. So it's not coming from the boost; it's coming from your ability. The boost is just +2 speed.
Correct.
So going back to what you just said about the hit effect on this. So the way that this would work, I put this down as a boost.
Hmm.
It says if you initiated the strike, +2 speed, otherwise +2 power. They they strike into me. I don't have the +2 power. If I hit, it returns to my hand. I still don't have the +2 power
Yes and no.
because
So
okay,
you have a choice. It is a may.
right,
So like in
yes,
this case, say we're at range 3 and I have this boosted, I'm now threatening guidance ascension.
right.
I'm now
Hence,
threatening.
hence what you said
I
about
mean,
range fixing.
mhm,
Gotcha. Okay,
yeah. It would also apply to like say I was using this ultra here, right?
right,
This would be a time where maybe I would just burn that, right?
right.
I would just take the +2 power and I'd hit for 7.
And you wouldn't then recur it. So to make it explicit for people who are watching, a lot of Phonon's attacks have X as their maximum range, or in the case of Guidance Ascension, their entire range,
Correct.
and it always is this attack's power. So if when Dark says range fixing, this +2 power means this hits at range 3, means this hits at 3 to 5 even on defense, stuff like that.
Right.
Uh, and
Exactly.
and and then if you need that, cool, you send it.
Yep.
Otherwise,
Because
otherwise, um, if you need to recur it for a reason, you don't need that extra power for some reason. You you just get to put it back in your hand and use it again later.
right, and the big thing with putting it back in your hand is because of a lot of our stuff. It's even if I just hit from here, I hit them with tuning satisfaction. Like I think they think that I'm going to go something slower or whatever. I could just throw something simple at them.
Yeah,
Right? I still return it in my hand, or I could even throw an assault at them, which they would never see coming. Right?
right.
Um, so then I salt in, and I don't typically need that power because 6 isn't generally going to break anything.
Yep.
Anything important in that regard, I should say.
Right.
So there's no reason to not to hold it. But typically you're going to use it, like I said, as a range fixer. And the thing is, so I boost them even when we're at 4. I have this boost out. I now have more range. I've still also drawn a card. So that's where her economy is coming from. I still
Okay.
have my advantage of my turn on your turn. And now
Right.
you are at a disadvantage.
Right.
Because if you move in, like we said before, now I'm at +2 power, +2 speed because of my action. Or I'm threatening my DP, or I'm threatening, more pushes. I'm banking on you not having, because I with 4 of these in the deck, I can still beat your dive.
Yep.
So this is the mix up in that is relatively safe. This card here is 1 to 8 and will eat a dive and can push you right back to 3. And now I'm at range 3 on my turn.
Yep.
So that's kind of how I play Phonon. That's kind of a good example there.
Okay.
One of the if we're getting into boost stuff, this is probably the best boost in our kit.
Okay.
Because you boost it for +1 power, now draw a card. I call it the Phonon prep.
Yep.
So you boost it, you draw 2 cards, you're at +1 power. So like if it's a turn after a strike, they moved in, I'm on +1 power anyway. I'm okay sacrificing my initiative, like the speed tie, to play this card and draw 2
Okay.
cards because now I
Okay.
have more options.
Yep. And you're doing more on your turn than just prepping. They need to react to this boost now, and you have an advantage going into their turn.
Correct. Because then if they, same as before, if they pass to me, I'm now at +3 power, which means anything will crush anything, right?
Sure. Sure. Uh,
That assault beats your sweep. That
yeah.
you know
All the stuff that you were saying about this, the +2 power on assault, now it's +3 power from this, and that's different. Now suddenly we have a different, like we're hitting breakpoints with that.
exactly scary breakpoints because
Yeah.
all the
That.
fours now hit
Yep. Hit for
super hard.
7. Yep.
And if this is online, um, on hit you double your bonuses to power. So now I'm at +3. Now this hits for 9
Yeah.
because you're adding +6 to that.
Right.
Do note that it's a hit effect, so that it does not affect range. So this would still only hit at 6 with +3.
6. Okay, that's good to know. Okay.
Yeah,
So
which a lot of people do get confused about that.
definitely, yeah, because hit effects are checked after range is already checked.
Hmm.
So the general game plan that you're advocating for is basically uh, push them out, make them come back to you. They're spending their turn doing it, so you are getting your ability as consistently as you can get it.
Right.
Um, uh, use your boosts to make their turns difficult when you're not striking, and then strike with your ability to chip them, or in the case that you just described, I'm not sure I could call 9 damage a chip. Uh, chunk them to
Right.
death with that.
Yeah,
Right.
this is generally a finisher. A lot of times I just use it for force if I have to move or something. The
Right.
boost is sometimes useful. The boost is very interesting. You reveal a card from your hand, and then that card's printed power becomes that power.
Sure.
Um, which typically, a lot of times, it's not really worth spending the card to do that. Um, when you can either +1 or +2 or boost something else. But sometimes, like you reveal sweep and strike with this, and you're just going to throw them to the other side of the arena,
Right.
right? And you're just going to tell them to leave, especially with this one, because you're drawing 2 cards anyway, right? Because 2 force draw 2. So,
Yeah. Okay.
which yeah,
These two things together give you ridiculous range control.
hmm you can
Okay.
put them pretty much wherever. Like if they're here, you go, okay, I boost this, reveal sweep, and then whatever your next attack is now you're not going to get your bonus on here because it's an out strike.
Right.
Which is funny. I said it. She didn't have one. I forgot about this. Um, so you're not getting your bonus unless, of course, they passed you with a bonus.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, again, mostly this is used for like a range setup. Um,
Right. So it's not going to be a backbreaking payout, especially if you do it with this, right? It's 1 damage.
Right,
But
right. Well, it's going to be 6 damage. You make it power 6.
oh, power 6, of course, right.
Yep. And then you just, effectively would throw Ryu all the way over here.
All the way to here, and he's got to deal with that on his turn, and now you're Phonon prepping or just setting yourself up to be ready for when he comes back in with your ability.
Right. And now what a
Okay.
lot of people will do is because, she has a lot of ranges and like even this, like you can use this is good against like grasp, right? Or even assault, it's not too bad. You won't get a push on assault though. I mostly use this for the boost, depending on where it's at. But this is also one of her few range 5 attacks that I think is pretty significant.
Right.
Because again, it just pushes them out, gives you advantage, and gives you time to reset up after you've already pushed them away.
And
Um,
the pull effect would be sort of specifically to deal with like counter zoning, I assume. Otherwise, she probably wants to be pushing more.
right, it depends. So at 5, I will typically pull to 3 because then
Okay.
I can reset them to I can push them back with something else if I need to.
Because you're getting advantage as well.
Right. So pulling in a range 3 with advantage is typically very good.
Right.
For example, one of her opening plays that you can do, if I were to call like you've had a God Hand, if you would, turn 1 you'd strike with Tuning Satisfaction and reveal a second copy. So
Mm-hmm.
you're probably going to beat them. You push them to 5. Then you'd boost your second one, which is just a simple +1 power, take another action.
Yep.
Uh, so you
Oh,
do that.
because you reveal it, you don't discard it. It's still in your
Correct.
hand. Right.
hmm
Okay.
So then they already know you have it. Boost it. So now you're at +2 again. Then you'd strike with Sliding Affliction. Chances are they're
And
not going to hit you.
so now it's to 5.
To 5 because you had the additional +1.
Yep.
So your power 5 hit for 5
Yep.
and pull them to 3. Now guess what? My turn, I'll +1 and now I can assault them.
Right. Right. You have advantage, so you can keep on. Uh,
Yep.
you can keep that combo going, and you're not getting because you're taking turn after turn after turn. You're not getting your +2 power every single time, but you are getting turns, and that's valuable too.
Right, you're getting turns and you're still getting +1 power. And then at that point, I can either, if I have a Binding Beatitude in hand, I can boost it for that Phonon prep,
Yep.
or I could just strike with a sweep if I have it, right?
Right.
And now all of a sudden, I'm like, the problem with that is, yeah, you run out of cards, but I've just taken roughly 14 life off of
That's
you.
like half your health. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty solid opener, and it even works on defense because this is still a really good defensive card at range 4,
Sure.
and I don't
Yeah.
have to reveal another one for
And
it's
I feel like several of her cards, at least by reputation, like don't have are not great on defense specifically because of this range band problem where
correct.
she's not getting her stuff. But I mean, between this and this,
hmm
she at least has, and specifically EX guidance ascension, as you mentioned, she at least has some tools on defense to
Right,
contend with, but they might be kind of longer range only defensive
right,
tools.
right. Which is why typically on defense, it's a season 6 problem, right? Season 6 typically is much weaker on defense
Yeah.
as a whole. Now, Phonon,
Yeah.
I think, is one of the few people that because there isn't a whole lot of setup play in season 6.
Hmm.
She can do that because really, you're trying to set up your own defensive stuff if you're confident, regardless of your offense.
Right.
Um,
And that speaks again to what you were saying about making their turn as difficult as possible, that she can actually kind of make that happen.
right, right.
Right.
You can, and then for certain things, one of the big things with Phonon is knowing when to exceed.
I was actually about
Uh,
to ask about that.
mhm.
Yeah, tell me about her veil off.
So, and you say veil off, and I will typically try to save a focus as much as everyone. Focus is like the ultimate defense option, right? Like it's
Sure.
it's quote unquote free most of the time.
Yeah,
Um,
in with a character in a season that doesn't have a lot of really stable defensive options, focus is a pretty good one.
right, exactly. Because
Right.
otherwise, your other option is this one to kind of reset a little bit, and then on defense, you're just kind of creating a space for one turn, right?
Yeah.
Like just push one, but it's draw 2. Like this is her focus equivalent ish.
Right.
Um, so on with focus, veil off is very good because then like it gives you the extra gauge, which gives you more more of a safety net. Because on the flip side here, you basically always have fierce in your turn, right? You're spending economy
Right.
to get +2 power, and it's always a
Right.
+2 power. But the advantage is if you're playing against someone like Ryu, where they can play their own footsies. If they do their footsies, Now you go to a spot you don't like. So if I'm
Right.
playing against someone like Lychee, for example, Lychee really likes setting up certain ranges. Uh, one of the I play with a couple people who are some of the better players out there, and Lychee's definitely up there. And they both agree that Phonon is a nightmare for Lychee because
Okay.
it does not give her any time to set up because Lychee will like go into range 3, right?
Yeah.
Setting up a lot of her range 3 options. Okay, she moves to range 3. Now she has to decide is Matemba going to come down, and you go, okay, here's +2
Right.
power. Now what?
Now I'm at 2 instead, and you have to deal with this.
Right. Or if Matembo's down, I go, okay, Nair -1 speed. I'm at +2 power. Now what?
Right.
So
Um,
it really lets you further that dance.
right. So it sounds like what you're saying, like this isn't necessarily a when you exceed situation where in every matchup you're going to be doing this, but against certain opponents, this is a big deal.
Right, exactly. Because the other thing with on the flip side is you have to move when you use if it's a turn after a strike.
Right.
I believe.
Otherwise, you're not getting your ability at all. You can't
Right,
you can't just have it.
right. Now there have been times where I pushed them out to here, and then you revert as you can do with season 6. You spend you basically put a card from your hand into your gauge and
Yep.
flip, and depending on what you have, and then you can go okay +2
Right.
power or boost strike, and from here you can set up your ultras in that regard.
Right.
Um, So you're just playing that gauge match, which I mean that's the season 6 thing, where you either don't have enough gauge or you have too much gauge. You
Yeah.
kind of got to
Yeah.
play it by ear,
Pretty much. Yeah. Okay. So that all makes sense, and that's kind of the general play pattern.
right?
Um,
And
let's
the other thing is on defense, a lot of people will just think, okay, I'm going to run into Phonon. She doesn't like
yeah,
being at range 1. That's not true because now her normals are still all +1. Like she can
sure,
still power 8 or 7 or 8 sweep you at range 1 or power 5
right,
grasp you at range 1.
yeah. So you're actually not really you're making yourself safer from these, but she has
Right.
normals too.
And now she's going to do more damage to
Right,
you.
right. Okay, and normals with some extra power. Sweep is the big one because it does beat your counter sweep. But even if you're just chipping,
Right,
uh,
exactly.
yeah, like I mean,
Because the other thing
you
is if you move in, that power 8 sweep also breaks your focus now.
sure,
Like you have to realize that you just go, okay, well, could this be, even if you want to mess with your opponent a little bit, even tell them like this could be a power 8 sweep, and they go, oh, what have I done?
right, yeah, yeah, and that's when you play something that isn't the sweep, right? To
Right,
to mix them up. Hence it's a fighting game,
right.
of
So they're
course.
probably not going to play the focus of that regard because
Right.
they'll get destroyed, and then you can play your suppressive restriction and throw them to range 3 or something
Sure,
like
yeah.
that, right?
They're gonna like range one dive you because now they're so afraid of the sweep or something like that.
Right, which is fine because then that gives you a free range,
Yeah.
um, which is very nice.
Okay. So that all makes sense as a game plan. Let's so we've kind of jumped from attack to attack while talking about the game plan, but let's be a little bit more explicit with some of these. So this is we mentioned this a little bit. This is a really good DP sometimes.
Correct. Yeah,
Um,
this just by itself, if you just read the card as is, it's range 1, speed 6, power
push
1.
two. Yeah.
Yeah, push 2. Not great because it really by itself it kind of doesn't beat anything, right?
Right.
Like it beats a range 1 assault, I guess.
Right.
you know, it beats I guess some risky mid speeds. Uh, but then as soon as power starts coming into it,
Right.
that's when it really starts to beat things because the power equals range. Now in
Okay.
this case, because the power equals range, you have to set it up yourself, and you just have to. It's kind of something you have to always keep available to threaten. Um, Keeping the EX is a really good, like, depending on the person you're playing against, is a really good, like, oh, I'm going to do this at 2. And you just go, no, right? Like, it's more or less unbeatable on EX at 2. Um, for most things, you'd be throwing at 2. Like, it beats cross. It beats, I mean, it does, no one's going to cross out against you anyway, but,
Sure.
um,
But again, like other than focus, it's beating almost everything.
right.
Yep.
Focus at range 2. And the thing with Phonon is you just kind of accept that there's 2 focuses in the deck.
Yep.
And if they focus you, that just gives you more options later. In
Sure.
most cases, that's a reading down,
Yep.
so you can hold on to your normals a little better. Not
Yep.
that that's a problem in season 6 for season. I guess reading is in season 6. It's parry. That's not in season 6.
Correct.
Um, yeah. And then even like worst case scenario with this, the boost is also really good.
Yep.
because it gives you that, if they move into to 3, well, if they move into 3, you're probably going to strike anyway. But if we're at longer ranges at 4, you push them back and they prepped, just boost it,
Right.
right?
Now you've got it
Um,
on. Now you've got it on your ability on their turn, or if they give it back to you, you're doubled up, and you'll hit them really hard.
right,
So at worst, this hits here for almost nothing, doesn't beat anything. Here, it starts being useful. If it's a turn after a strike or something,
yeah,
you
right
you
there, it's on curve and it
yep
does beat, it beats your
beats
sweeps, right?
beats sweep, sure. Over here now it's a whirl. Uh, Still beats everything, but it's above curve now. Uh only when you have your kind of your full ability does that work. But
Right,
then anytime you can get a +1 power from somewhere else, you can make this happen even on defense. Like there's plenty of ways to set this up as a or EX it to set it up as like a real DP shape.
right, and that's kind of the game you have to play with phone, and that's why this boost is so good,
Right. Right.
right?
So
Because that
the
+1 power is enough
plus
to keep this online.
sure, +1 power is notably less than +2 power, but it's still enough to make this happen.
Right.
Um,
And even on offense, it's a thing to consider where people might, strike and move in, and they move into range 2. This is still an option on your turn now.
sure.
Because if it's not, say they, we strike it, or, they move in to 2, now this isn't online
Yeah,
because you can't hit, because you would hit, you'd
you
only
would hit
hit
you would hit there.
tab. Yeah. Right there. Yep.
Yes.
Which is, I guess the counters to consider about later. But with this attack, you really have to know where you're hitting.
Sure.
Um, and it's just something to always consider in the back of your mind, especially, when you have it in your hand. But also, it's a fighting game. You have to make sure they are aware that this DP exists.
Right. And threaten it to set up your other stuff.
Right. It's like,
Um,
it's like getting to 3 gauge with shovel and shield, right?
oh yeah,
Now
yeah,
you just have to let
you
your opponent know that shield boomerang it now exists.
yeah, and now they'll play around it, you play around the counterplay.
Right. Which typically you have the advantage of playing around the counterplay because they might play a little slower, which means
Yep.
your
Yep.
slower attacks hit here.
And you're using your and you yeah. They do play that focus. You're like, okay, cool, spike.
Right, exactly.
We're
Yeah,
at range
Phonon's range
2.
2 spikes are gross.
Yeah, definitely. So and for the boost for charge attack, obviously +2 power needs no explanation other than the part about it being on the opponent's turn as well. The
Mhm,
when you advance or retreat, add this to your gauge. So first of all, that includes taking the move action and also assault, right?
correct. It also
Anytime,
applies to her exceed side.
right? Okay, so she can't do both.
Correct.
Um, but so is that a strict downside? Would you prefer to just have the +2 power most of the time, and that kind of means that low key you can't really play this with assault or something? Or
Most of the time, yeah.
are you but and in that case, so you would never play this just to get gauge. Uh
Yes and no. I did
okay.
have a fight recently, I'd say within the past month or so, where I had this boosted. I think we might have been situation like this.
Sure.
I had this boosted, they passed the turn to me, and, now I have a +4 power, really strong effect here. But
Yep.
what I think they had a counter, I don't remember exactly what it was for something nice. So what I did was I phone on to action back, put this to gauge, and struck with this,
Oh,
which gave
sure.
me my 3rd gauge.
Right. And so in situations where you have, you're trying to get to a specific gauge breakpoint, that can be enough. But otherwise, it's generally a downside that you can't advance or retreat.
Correct, yeah. And she's probably not going to advance or retreat too much. Charge attack is just it's a very common boost in season 6.
Sure.
I know for a fact Batista has it,
Yep.
for example, and
Yep.
she's typically going to be more flighty than Phonon will be. Phonon doesn't move as much as she moves her opponent.
She pushes. Yeah. What about a
Yeah,
situation like cross, where so I'm I don't know here. I play cross with this down. I hit for 5 and I back up. Does that work? Does that go to gauge after the attack hits?
it will go because cross is on hit. You
I
will lose
think
this before the strike,
I think cross is. Let me look at that 1 second.
or maybe I think it's
I,
an after.
yeah, cross is an after. Yeah, okay, yeah, cross is an after. So you would get the power and then you would back up,
I
and then it
believe
would go
so.
to
Yeah,
gauge. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
yeah. Because it's not an on hit thing. It is an after effect. Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
and this would go to gauge afterwards, and then cleanup would occur and all that stuff. Okay, cool.
So you get 2 gauge off of that. Yeah,
Sick.
which
All
is
right,
which
got
would be the ideal situation.
right.
Um, Speaking of cross, that is another boost that can set up guidance ascension.
Right.
It's a very strong. So cross is a very strong card for Phonon because it gives you distance. So most people just on at first glance would be like, oh, I'm just going to throw cross and leave. Which case in this would beat their focus regardless. But if you just boost your cross, now it's a range setup. But
Yep.
now guidance ascension is EX, which we talked about before. EX guidance ascension is very strong.
Sure. Yeah, and you're not spending the other copy of it.
Correct. That's the
Right.
important part. But yeah, if you
Right.
boost cross at 2 on past their turn, now they have to think because you could have the other cross in your hand. You're still EX sweep is still a problem to consider. EX spike even is a thing to consider.
Yep.
EX assault is a thing to consider. Like that, you're
Yeah, on
changing
on
the
cur-
range of your.
yeah, on curve gain advantage is fine.
Hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Cool.
So yeah,
All right.
the with guidance ascension, this is probably her or like I guess it's her trickiest card, right? It's a very important card. Um, Knowing when to do things. You could even be at 3 and have EX guidance ascension in your hand, like you have both, and you could just throw the boost, and now you're threatening the other one at 3, and most people won't see that coming.
Right.
Because now you make your guidance ascension hit at 3, which is big.
Yeah.
But typically, I would really mostly only boost that if I want to threaten range 5, especially
Oh,
on defense.
right.
Because now that activates this. That activates this. It turns both your ultras online
Okay.
to hit at 5.
So
Because
you're specifically looking for defensive options with this because otherwise you can hit at 5 with a lot of things on your turn with
right,
your ability.
well, so if it's a turn after a strike, I should say. So like,
Hmm.
say big example would be I tuning satisfaction, push them to 5, and then I gain
Yeah.
advantage off of it, right?
Right.
So now,
You can't hit him again.
right, typically because I would have to do something else. I'd have to boost, like I said before, boost that other tuning satisfaction to get the +2 power, or I boost this or this to get that +2 power,
Sure.
right? Um, to keep the threat of range 5 alive.
Right.
Um, Otherwise, you know, you just prepare and hope they don't have another action because they're going to move in. It's that game of, do I think you have something? Do I think their turn is going to be bad enough where I'm okay drawing cards, which is sometimes fine, right?
Sure. Sure. Sure.
I think what is the term go? You prepare when you have an option. You change cards when you don't.
Yeah, pretty much. You're preparing as a punish.
Right.
You're in a situation you like when you prepare generally.
Yeah, because typically when you prepare in fighting games terms, you're passing the turnover, right?
Right.
Like your combos are done, your turn is done, and you're giving it to them. And hopefully with Phonon, when you're preparing, they don't have any options. Typically at
Yeah.
range 5, most people don't.
Right. Okay.
Um, yeah.
So that'll make sense.
Hmm.
Okay. So that's guidance ascension. Tuning satisfaction, we mostly covered. It's a fast projectile. You have 4 of them. Catch their dives over and over again. Bully
Yep.
them with this to range 5. And as we just discussed, uh, then your next thing is set up something at range 5 to hit them with, and it could be compounding plots. It could be lots of
It could
your
be Baroque noise. It could be something else. Now, this is also a really good attack at range 3. So we go to
okay.
3, especially if you have 2 of them in your hand, because then you push them to 4, you gain advantage, and you just throw the other one.
Sure.
Then you push them to 5, and then you boost and do your thing.
Yep.
Typically, because it's on curve at 5, it's above curve at 4. I wouldn't really throw it at 2 or 3, or 1 or 2, unless it's like a very specific call out where it's like, I think you're trying to be cheeky, and I'll just knock you out.
Right.
I have been called out at range 1 where someone has thrown a spike at me.
Oh, and
Yeah.
they just get their backup for free because you supplied it.
Hmm.
That's funny.
Yeah, it was very funny. I'm just like, wow, okay.
I should be clear. That sounds funny for them.
Yeah, oh, it's very funny for
Maybe
that. Now, it's not as insane as it sounds, right? Because you have 1, 2, 3 things at 1
all push.
that all push. Yeah. Now,
Sure.
obviously, this won't if you're using your ability, but they all push at least 1 or 2.
Yeah. Sure.
Um,
So
Although I guess this will push them 3 on if it's the turn after, not the turn after a strike. But yeah.
but they had a higher than they didn't read your soul when they did this. They just
They played the odds and they're like, all right, okay.
yeah
And like,
they had
I might have been in a situation where like I might have been like still caught if I crossed out, right?
right
It was
they
just like
had
it was a weirdly okay call. Like I couldn't be mad about him. Like I was
right
like, well done.
They had decent odds of success.
Yeah, of course they could have also just wild swung it. It's a thing that can happen on a wild swing where it's like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna then it's always spike on wild swing. You got to remember that.
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes spike hits when you wild swing when you don't mean it to.
Right, exactly, which is really
Okay.
funny.
All right.
But
So
yeah, so tuning satisfaction is most of this plus one power taking another action.
yep,
Is also like a threat where okay they move in and then you can just boost one and now you're at plus three power.
yep,
So your things hit real hard. Like we said before, that's where a lot of your break points come from. Your
yep.
assault now breaks sweep. Your sweep just ruins their soul.
Yep.
Um, your grasp is still at 6, which isn't doesn't break sweep, but it might as well. Um,
Yeah. I mean,
you're trading with
like
sweep at that point.
167 is a incredibly bad stat line. I would never want that on my
It's such a
card.
it's terrible, right? It's
Yeah.
absolutely yeah. Even
Right.
your focus at that point. I guess it doesn't break focus. Um, yeah, because you're only at 7. But yeah, just I mean, plus 3 power at any point. Most
Yeah.
people are spending what 2 or 3 force for that, which I
Right. Yeah.
suppose you are. Right, you're spending
And
1.
and you're happy with it.
Right, exactly.
Um. Okay.
Another thing with this, if we're here and this is the same as this really because you boost and prepare, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I see what you mean. Yeah. So if you are far enough away that you have some time and they're coming back into you, that other action can just be, well, all right, I'll reload a little bit.
Right. I don't have to strike you. Like we
Right.
said before, I if I boost this and draw some cards, I think your turn is sufficiently not good.
Right.
And then you either strike me and I still have my threats, or you move in and I crush you.
Yep. Okay.
Especially if I
That
have this out, and then I back up and I just make your turn. I kind of even take your turn away even more.
right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. And then for these two, I don't think we didn't talk that much. We talked a little bit about sliding affliction specifically as your sort of more than range 4 option. But for these two, are they basically just kind of like other push effects? Like it didn't sound like they were or at least when you were describing the game plan, they didn't come up as like keystones to it.
Right. Yeah. Because you have 4 copies of tuning satisfaction. These two threaten the same range effectively, right?
Yeah.
And they do a lot of the same thing. This one has the push too. This is this is totally fine on turn 1 because it still beats dive.
Yep.
It's still if they assault, they want to be cheeky and assault in. They might be thinking you're going to dive in or something like that.
Yep.
It still does that and kind of negates their assault. It pushes them back to 4. Um, and like these two are probably your staple openers.
Yep.
Obviously this one's better, but like this is totally fine.
Okay.
And especially when you're seeing like this is also if you think they're going to sweep you, this is good
Yep.
because it pushes them out.
Yep.
And this, regardless of like, this is not bad on defense, depending, right? It beats sweep at 2, which is important. And then it loses to assault, which I mean everything loses to assault at 2 besides cross. And if they cross out,
You're happy.
yeah, like cool.
Right.
Because in most other seasons they lose, cross has their run,
Right. Right.
so they're not gonna have their move in. Um, it's a straightforward attack. Typically at 4, it's on curve and pushes them out to 6, which is when I would use it a lot of times just to again make their turn not as good. They're
Yeah.
spending more turns coming in. I get to prep. I get to boost. I get to do whatever.
Right.
Now on the other side, this is a free +3 power on defense because you just get this to gauge at the start of turn if you're boosting this.
Right.
So like if you just really want to flex on them, you can just if we're at 4, you just boost that, and now your guidance ascension hits at 4
Okay. Yep. And does a lot too.
and does and it'll do and it just basically puts them in the edge of the arena, right? You hit them for
Yeah.
4, and then you just tell them to leave forever.
Right. But
um,
it sounds like both sides of these cards though, like notably, we did not need to like think of and find use cases for tuning satisfaction. It sounds like we're actively looking for uses of this card. Does that just mean that it's a slightly less impressive part of her kit than everything else?
it's I'd say it's a more average card
Okay.
overall. It's like an on curve card at 4.
Yeah.
It's a slow. I don't want to say it's a slow fireball. There's no guard on it.
Right.
And it's okay at 3 depending on the situation because it still beats at least on no, it beats the range 3 mix up that is an assault, and
I
on
mean
defense it beats or offense it beats dive.
it's like the things that you're losing to when you play this card are not as backbreaking as the things that it's beating, or the things that you're dodging, right? Like if you're dodging sweep, awesome. If you're losing to assault, well, okay, that sucks.
Right. It's yeah. It does suck, especially depending on the character because you don't want to get advantage. Getting advantage
Advantage,
chained in season 6 is never fun.
yeah,
Uh,
and you're not getting your ability. They're pressuring you at range 1 where you don't want to be.
right. You're just throwing, hoping you have enough defenses to break through, and then you can break out
Right. Okay.
later. But yeah, typically this is just if throw it when you think it's good. Throw it at 3 and 4 is typically where you want to be. If you think they don't have because cross isn't really an option at range 2
Right.
because they're typically if they cross out, it's a win-win. They're actually pushing further
Yeah, they're
than
doing
you
their
have.
they're doing your job for you at that
Right,
point.
and you took 3, like, okay,
Right.
cool.
Right. Cool.
Um,
8,
yeah,
9 later.
right, especially if you're on Exceed side, they go to 5, now you're at +2 power, so your other things will hit.
Right.
So, uh, yeah, it's a very straightforward there's really no, like, hidden secrets with this one, it's what you read is what you get.
Okay. And
Um,
then this one, you did mention some things about like really this is only valuable at range 4 or more.
it's where
Uh,
you're gonna get your most value out of because then as at range 4 is where you get your push or pull, or range 4 plus, I should say, and is where you get your push or pull and advantage. It's really front loaded on there.
right.
Like, it's safe to throw at 1 because you trade with grasp because it's
Right.
got the 4 guard on it. You can if you think they're going to assault, like you can like if I'm playing defensively against like shovel and shield, and they might assault me turn 1. Uh, Sliding infliction's fine. You just
Right.
trade with them a little bit. You take 4, they take 3. You have some gauge.
Right.
Um,
But
because
that's more about Phonon not having incredible defensive options among her specials than this being a particularly amazing defensive option.
correct, yeah, and because it's a guarded fireball, it's got 4 damage on it. You can typically use it against other fireballs, like
Right.
you can use it against Ryu.
Reuse
You know,
Hadouken, fine. Yeah, that's
Yep,
fine.
uses
If you,
Hadouken, and then you pull him into range.
yep.
So, like, you pull him. Yeah, obviously, it's gonna, you know, you're still gonna take the damage, but then like you pull him into
Right.
here. Now his Hado's suddenly not that great anymore.
Right. And you're setting the pace for your next strike because you're the one who chose this range.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So I
But
initiate with this at 4. He can go, oh, critical Hado on defense.
right.
Cool. All right, I'll just pull you. Now I have advantage, and now I can, do all the things Phonon does at 2. Right.
Yep.
Um,
Sure.
which is typically what you use this for. That's why it has a pull on there. It's kind of like an anti-fireball. Um, you're not gonna, defensively, because a lot of guarded fireballs are speed 3, if I remember right. Like, it's not gonna be great on there because they're typically going to do more than 4.
Sure.
Because that's what a guarded fireball does. But it depends. That's also depending on where you're at. It's a cross catch if
Oh,
you have the
sure.
power on it.
Sure. Yeah.
For people that like new who might want to cross out, you can all right +2 power. Even at 1, new crosses out. You go all right. Well, come on back then.
Right. So the pull is for anti-zoning. The cross catching is if they ever wanted to cross you out, which means that they're probably a zoner anyway. And then
Hmm.
otherwise you're pushing, if they don't have a slow fireball that you're trying to contend with, or if you're trying to get like a loopable fireball offline, you're pushing to make them come back in.
Right. Yeah. A lot of times with a card like this, if you're at 4 and I'm like, I need some breathing room, and I know you have nothing like Zangief or something like that, I'll just throw you to
Sure.
the corner,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And I'll breathe after that.
Right. Yeah. And then I've got advantage and I can take a big breath and get 2 cards out of it or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Most of the time though, I will be, as I mentioned before, I'll be using this as a boost.
Yep.
Because when you boost this, your opponent kind of goes, oh, okay. Well, first they go what? Then they go
Right.
oh, and then they go
Yeah.
oh.
Then they read it and then they're like, oh, okay, that seems bad. And then they realize how bad it is. And also, I mean, and you don't have to choose all the time because it comes back
Right.
to your hand. You just play it as sliding a fiction later if you need to.
Right. Exactly. And I've done that.
Right.
Where like people think, oh, I'm going to take the extra damage. They're like, no, I'm just going to throw it in my hand. And then now they know I have this, this guarded fireball
Right.
uh, online. So if they want to cross out, I'll still catch them. I'll pull them
So
back into range 3 with advantage.
so I feel like I feel like when you're initiating with this, like it's Way of the Warrior, you don't care what it's on. Way of the Warrior is just good. Just put it on something that's going to
Mhm.
hit. Are there any particularly amazing things that this boost synergizes with in your kit, or is it just like, man, I'm just gonna hit you and be happy about it?
Well, the two things this is really good with are if it, assuming it gets passed to you, right?
Right.
You can close out games with this because now
Yep.
you're at +4 power on your turn, assuming it
Yep.
passed to you, which
Yep.
that +4 power actually becomes 8, which
Yep.
becomes 11 damage.
Yep. And it's speed 6.
Correct.
Yep.
Um,
Hits the
which is
whole
just a
board.
yeah, hits the whole board, just destroys them. And the
Right.
other big thing is we mentioned before, it sets up guidance.
Right.
Sets up a range 3 guidance.
Yep.
Um, which the big thing with it is it sets up not only range 3 guidance, if you're going to be using it offensively, you have your +2 power. You can now strike boost, so you could mix up from range 2 to range 3, and now you're still threatening guidance attention.
Oh, right. It's the so you're not using your ability, but it's the
Your ability is you are using your ability because you're
right.
+2. Oh no, I'm sorry, I lied. You're +2 speed on your turn. Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Yeah. So that you're just setting up at your range. I was thinking something else. Um,
It's all good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Still early
Oh,
for me.
no, of course. No. And I mean, and as you mentioned, the first thing that the people do is what when they see this card, and that can apply even to us. That's why
Right,
we're
right,
ex-
right.
that's why we're explaining it.
Yeah.
Um okay.
Defensively, it sets up your guidance ascension.
Yeah, totally.
In a
And
big way.
and generally then, because of how scary this is with resonance in play when they pass it back, they're going to be trying to get rid of this boost um
If they tech it,
to
depending on the season, that's a dive gone or that's a block gone. Right.
right. Right.
I'm okay with both of those things.
And
That's one less thing getting in, then that's one less block to what that I have to chip through.
and
Because
because it recurs, it's not like it's not like uh I can just say like, all right, cool, we're way out here. I play grasp to poor man's tech to get rid of this boost.
right,
If you
especially
hit,
because
and you probably will hit because your Phonon, it just
hmm
comes back.
right, just goes right back to hand. It's like, okay, I don't hit you for I hit you for 3. Say I'm using this impulsive restriction, but now you just happen to be further away because now you're sitting over here.
Right. And now I have time to play this boost again. I still set up complete servitude for later.
Right,
All right.
exactly.
Okay. Okay. That all makes
Yeah,
sense.
in fact, at from this range, I believe complete servitude would hit if you
Yep.
passed to my turn like entirely.
Yep. Yeah.
So
Because
that's most of the time
it's
that's going to be a boost. The attack is there again, like you said. If there's a quick fireball that comes out, or it's a cross catch, or you really don't have many other options, and you don't feel like wild swinging at one, then you can just throw it
sure.
at one. Especially depending on who you're at, they could jump away or something like set themselves up, and they go, "Oh, oops," and then they're further away, or you pull them right back in where they don't want to. Because some people, it's an anti-zoner or it's an anti up close, or not anti
Right.
up close, but it's just it fixes them up. The whole card kind of fixes range
Yeah.
at range.
It's like so far we're like by default in attack, kind of both. By default an attack, but not that impressive one. By default a boost, but a pretty
Right.
good attack too. And if there's
Yeah.
reasons to use it, then use it.
Right. Like that. This is if I were to say my go-to range 5 attack is sliding affliction.
Okay.
Right, because that either pushes them so far out of range that they don't have a turn,
Yep.
and they have to spend all the resources moving in, or I'm pulling you into 3 with advantage, and I'm going to start punishing.
Yep.
Right. So that's typically if I'm at range 5, I go, ooh, okay. And I do if I'm at range 5 with the +2 power, I should say, I go,
Yep.
okay, this is where this one shines. Otherwise, if I don't have that, I can't get the +2 power. I boost it, and now I do.
Yep.
Because then, it turns this on. It turns, your ultras on
Sure.
at range
Okay.
5.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because even at range 5, this is really good. Because once you go past 4, range doesn't matter anymore, or speed doesn't really matter.
Right.
Because if you hit, you hit.
Yeah.
So and if they
And
move
and
in and they
and
just don't want to
and
pass,
if you hit, you probably broke them with it
right?
because of
Because
the
it'll be 7.
the double.
Yeah, it was real strong. And then if they passed you with it out, now like as you mentioned before, we have Way of the Warrior, and now your turn's really strong.
Yeah.
There's a Way of the Warrior, well, We have a Ryu right here. What are the things Ryu does with Way of the Warrior, right?
Yeah, whatever he wants,
Whatever he wants to do, exactly.
basically. Yeah.
Because all right,
Okay.
you moved into range 2, we'll say, like that's all you get to. Well, now I have a Way of the Warrior spike.
Right. Deal with it.
What are you gonna do? Cross out?
Cross out
You
again.
just spent all your resources moving in.
You just ran back in, right? You spent that cross to get in the first place.
Right. And now I go, okay. And then it's a very strong boost in that regard because it passes, and some characters can deal with it a lot. But you put it in your opponent's court and go, this is now your problem.
Yep.
Because I feel confident, like I'm basically, like I said before, I'm passing my turn to you, and the only thing I'm really trading is the initiative tie. But we're at range. Typically, we're going to be at a longer range, so I don't care.
Yeah, where maybe there's not much that you can even do to me out here.
Right. Exactly.
Sure.
Even
Okay,
if
that
it's
makes
just a
sense.
tuning satisfaction where like I'm not going to hit you for 4, like I don't care, I'm just going to bounce in my hand. Did it actually do anything? No, but the threat is still there, and I didn't lose anything because I returned that to my hand anyway.
Right. All right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm.
So both sides of this are actually pretty valuable then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
It's a very, I'd say, underrated inner kit. Like it's not underrated. It's often overlooked on the whole.
right.
Typically, your eyes will look at everything, and you will settle on resonance though.
Right. Yeah. That seems like the in a kit with a lot of red numbers.
Hmm.
Uh, there's a yellow number on this card, and I go, oh man, what?
Yep.
And it's a +2. But no, yeah, you're right. That this clearly has some use cases to it. What about suppressive restriction? You mentioned this briefly for its crazy combo with
With
where is it?
servitude with Munal here.
Yeah,
Uh, the boost on there. Typically, this is your really safe option at 1. Even though does hit the whole board. If you are playing against like say Sagat, right? And Sagat, you ate the dreaded low tiger shot, and he caught you with your pants down, right?
right,
Like we could be here, you could do this, and you just pull him in.
right,
Because it doesn't matter if he pushes you, you're gonna pull him into range. Um, it's just a really safe attack. It doesn't do a whole lot, but it's safe in that it's got 6 guard. So it's like a sweep. Doesn't nearly hurt as hard as a sweep, but it does have card draw on it as well. And bare minimum, even without anything, um, you've got a push or pull 1, right? So no matter where they are, say we're at 5, right? I told you sometimes Phonon doesn't have options at 5. So they couldn't get anything in there. They might feel safe, and you go, okay, well now I pull you into 4 or 3,
sure,
and now on my turn, my options are good, especially because I just drew 2 cards off.
yep.
Um,
And you can get even a little bit out of this even on their turn, so you can respond with this and mess up their positioning a little bit for your turn to set things up.
exactly. Yeah, this is
Right,
really good on defense because it does help set up your turn. And now with
right,
all these other boosts, it can also turn into a nightmare. This is just straight up as it is. Like,
right,
say we're in a situation where I tuning satisfaction, I push you to 5,
right,
and I just for some reason I didn't get anything else right. Like I didn't have any boosts up. I didn't have another one. I just passed the turn at 5.
right.
This is your option at 5
Okay.
because it
And
hits them for 1, it pulls them in, or say they moved into 3 and like, oh, I'm going to do this, and you just push them back to 4.
right, and then you get two cards out of it, which is awesome. So
2 cards in a
the
gauge. I'm all right
yeah,
with that.
seems good economically. The 2 speed though also means that even with a lot of boosts on this that are pushing and pulling a big deal, you're unlikely to be using this to like dodge a fireball, right? It's too slow for that.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
unless there's like, I mean, even low tiger shot is going to
Yeah,
be
it's still 3. There's not a lot of ranged options that are that slow that you're going to be trying to dodge around.
right. It's definitely more of like, okay, I've got a hit. I'm gonna. It's this is your economic card. You're getting
Right.
engage out of it. Bare minimum, you're getting engage in 2 cards out of it, unless you get like spiked or donkey kicked or does donkey kick
Donkey Kick hits 6.
is that
So it
his whatever his ignore guard is
uh
uh
I think
the
it's
one
I
inch
think it's
punch
it's just spike. 1 inch punch ignores armor.
armor. Okay, then yeah, never mind.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just spike. So hence why you're saying it's a good range 1 option.
Yeah, it's good range 1 Dobbin. And then it's good at range 1 because even if they do, you know, throw the range 1 spike, you just throw them over your shoulder,
Yep.
and it's the grasp option.
Yeah, pull
Um,
him in the corner instead.
yeah, and on this without anything, it's typically again, like I said, she likes playing the range 4 option at range or the range 3 option at range 4,
Yep.
right? So you can set up at range 4, you put them here. but at 5, you can pull them into 4. Now, once we start getting into a turn where, say it's entirely possible we end up in a situation like this. I've been in this situation where, like, okay, I don't really got anything going on myself. Uh, I'm just going to do this, and I'm just going to pull you into here,
Sure.
right? Um, and against certain characters, I'll just throw them into the corner and just prep. But
Yep.
then it
Yeah.
gets
And
weird.
but for all the reasons that you would make that decision with every other card we've talked about, it still applies here.
Right, exactly,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
It's the same, it's a very Phonon-esque card.
Yeah. So
But it is one of her good range 1 options because, depending on what you have boosted, it's a super grasp, right?
yeah.
It's a grasp that, they can EX grasp you and you don't care.
Yep.
Um,
I was
you
also
know,
about to say that it's also really convenient that the push or pull is an after effect because you would be able to do it even if you missed. But then I was like, wait, where would you possibly miss with this card? It hits the whole board.
it hits the whole board. Dive.
Sure, dive or like if like if Cammy CQCs you or something
Exactly, yeah.
to make you miss, but then it matters. But you're
Yeah, there's been also certain range traps, especially in season 6. There's a lot of those.
range
Um,
dodges. Sure, you've got your range 4 to 5 dodge or a speed dodge or something.
Against Lynn, for example, with her range
Oh
2
sure, her
ultra.
elusive flash. Yeah.
Yep, elusive flash. All right, cool. Well, I'll just put you over
Yep.
here now.
Go over there
Because Lynn
anyway.
loves being over here. Yes,
Gotcha.
give me more cards, Lynn. Please come in. Um,
Cool.
yeah,
What
the
about
boost. I
yeah? I
was
was
gonna
gonna
say
say
the
what about blowback?
blowback is, I believe I've seen on other season 6 cards as well.
I think
There's
so.
there's very few places where I would want to use blowback. Because if we're at range 1 or range 1 or 2, or yeah, we're at range 1. Why don't I just use my action and strike with it?
Right. It's the same thing
It's
but
the same
damage.
thing, right?
Yeah.
There are situations where, like, if I think they have an ignore guard boost up or they have a whatever, most of the time, or if, say, we come back to this charge attack, right? Uh, Now I push them out and I still have it.
Right.
But if I have this out, I'm not guidance intention them anyway. So it's like, it's very strange. Unless you have
And you also can't use your ability when you do this, right? Blowback.
correct, because it's push
It's a
1 or
strike.
2 then strike.
It's a
Yeah,
strike boost. So you would have to be choosing, and so why would you bother?
right. And it's for like very, very specific things.
Right.
Like, because typically, like, even if you have this boost out, guidance tension isn't going to hit with it because you're going to push him to here, and now you don't have you have speed, you don't have power.
Right.
Uh, if I'm doing something very particular, like, all right, I'll push him to here if I have this out, and I'll speed 7 assault you or
Right.
something, right? Even then, it's like I could just play this and do it later.
Right.
It's the boost is not super great. The
And
one thing that is nice about it, if I think they're going to focus or they have something like that, I will move them first.
oh sure.
That is
J-
now they're out of focus range, so I can then do whatever.
Yeah.
That's
You can't.
kind of the
They can't respond with the focus because this isn't happening during the strike itself.
right. So if they if I think they're holding on to a focus and they want to get in and just range 1 focus or something, I'll push it. Or like if I'm playing against like Geef,
Sure. Oh yeah.
yeah, I'll
I
put
don't. You
Geef
don't
or
want to be at
Potemkin in the
range
new
1.
season.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Totally.
yeah. Where it's just like, you're just gonna crush me with that anyway. Now we'll play a fair game out here. It's a
Yeah.
very situational boost because the attack is just so economic.
Yeah, and it's kind of like when we were talking about impulsive frustration, like I said that it was kind of clear that we were looking for reasons to use it. Blowback,
Right.
definitely. It's like, well, okay, it's on a good card, just use the card.
Exactly. Yeah. Like there's very little reason. Like you get to really look at that as you get a gauge and draw 2, and
Right.
then a slight move on your opponent depending on it at the bare minimum. Now, if you're all set up, like I said, if you do this combo here, with
Yep.
sweep or something, or even you reveal like a spike in your hand or something like that, like, or even really you can even reveal any card. Like say you had they know you have this in your hand, reveal it. It's still you push them 3.
Yeah.
Like it's still a move 3. Like that's still totally fine.
Yeah, that's still enough.
Right. This is your utility economic. Like it's a Swiss Army knife. It does everything
Sure.
except a lot of damage.
Yeah, it's not particularly exciting unless you combo it with something else.
Right. It's still pretty exciting by itself, just because like mostly it's the draw 2.
Yeah.
Right. It's the draw 2, minor positioning. It's really good on defense because then you start your turn at bonus cards. You put them where you want them to be. That's more or less that's what I'll usually use it for.
Right.
Um, if I think it's really good against like bang turn one, right? Because what's the bang goes, oh, I'm just going to bang style shuriken because it beats tuning satisfaction. All right, well I'll just throw
Sure.
this, and you moved out, I'll move you back to range.
Right.
Um, and then you have I'm up 2 cards, and you have one of your
One
you
of your
know
big specials down.
right exactly.
Yeah. All right.
That's
That'll make
yeah
sense.
yeah. So that it's very matchup dependent, but typically like you just throw it. Like if you're gonna prep, 9 times out of 10 you can just throw that
Right.
unless you're specifically saving it to knock something off, like if you think they're going to sweep or something, or actually if you read a sweep at 3, you can push them to 4, like read it's like a niche thing you can do, but that's very particular. You're
Right.
probably not going to be reading sweep. Well,
Yeah.
you
Sure.
can
Sure.
Fun
Yeah.
can read sweep pretty well.
Yeah. She's got a lot of ways to push him out, but right. I get your point that it might be a little bit uh
You're
situational.
getting real cute at that point.
Yeah. Sure. So for before we talk about the ultras in particular, just as a general consideration about the ultras, you mentioned that season 6 characters tend to have either not enough gauge or way too much of it.
Right.
Um, in general, when you are when like how big a consideration is landing these ultras? You've talked about complete servitude as being sort of like your big payout, maybe a win condition card where you're closing a game with it. So clearly, 3 of your
It
gauge should maybe be devoted to that.
um I wouldn't typically want to do that unless I feel confident with that. Like I've hit a situation where like they don't have a lot of health left, and we're like here, right?
Okay,
Like I've just tossed them into the corner, or
right,
they've
and
wild swung across or something, and it's like, oh, the stars have aligned, and I've got
right,
something out,
and you have a setup, and it's time to
and
cash out with it.
it's time to play. Yeah, like
Okay,
if I
I
had
gotcha.
this boosted or something,
Right,
they prepped out here or something, I'd throw that out, and
right,
then what do they do? They move in. I can just throw this now, get the
right.
extra gauge. But typically, it's a you complete servitude when it's available. Like
Right.
there have been times where like a big one is like you boost cross. Like that superior is a very strong move for her.
Yep.
Or because now your ranges are up, your speeds are up. Um and then if they pass, same thing with all your other ones, if they pass turn to you with that, now you're at +3 power, which still counts for your complete servitude, which is now 5. It's now a
Yep.
viable range 3 option.
Yep.
Um because it's a it's below curve at 3, and then it's on curve at 4. And on curve at
Yep.
4 is fine. You're doing 7 damage. Um, but 3 gauge for it, pick your
Yeah.
battles.
For that maybe not quite enough. But so
Yeah.
you need more than just what you can get out of a regular everyday setup for her.
Right. And it is. And there's a big payout of it. I think the most I've hit for, I think I've actually hit for like 13 with it.
Okay, yeah.
Um,
And that and maybe you're not gunning for that every game though.
right, exactly. I just happen to have it because I had boosts out, and like they're like, "Oh, we're gonna do this boost war." I'm like, "You're going to lose."
Okay.
Uh
So in that case, before we get into the altars themselves, what are you mostly spending your gauge on then? Is it just big CCs and big like economic stuff? Because if you're not exceeding in every game and you're not playing your ultras as attacks in every game, where is that uh gauge
it's
expenditure going?
it depends. A lot of times it'll be big CCs, like, typically this is gonna be 2 cards.
Right.
For me, especially early on, unless I'm in a spot where I'm just like, okay, I can burn, I'm really ahead. I'll just throw it.
Right.
What's the worst that happens?
Right.
I catch him for 7.
Right.
Otherwise, you're going to be it's going to be on this side depending on the game because you're going to
Right.
remain neutral here, right? You're going to hit them, get a gauge, defensively hit them, get a gauge potentially.
Right.
Um, Ideally, you're going to be neutral, I should say. But keeping the threat is up. But otherwise, like if you got a turn, you don't feel like prepping, you don't, you have you throw one of these in a gauge and draw 4 cards, right?
Sure.
Um,
And that's if you're not doing the Muniel suppressive restriction combo that you were
right,
talking
right.
about earlier. Yeah.
Um, and then just note that doesn't have to be that is the biggest combo. It also applies to your normals as well. So you can just make your grasp hit for 6 as well if you want.
Yep.
In fact, if you want, I have gone to really mess with people. I've revealed the sweep and thrown an EX with Munal. and now my grass broke the sweep that they try to defend with. Like, oh, I'll just trade with this grass. I think that's coming.
Right.
Uh,
So when you do this, just for some rules parsing here, reveal a card from your hand, then strike.
Correct.
That doesn't mean that you have to strike with the revealed card, first of all.
Right. You can,
Right.
but
But
that's really just kind of like a. It's like it's a head game at that point. It's like, oh, I'm gonna reveal
right.
this and strike with this. Oh, and then they go,
Sure.
I'm gonna strike with this, and
Yeah.
you just kind
But
of got
but
in their head a little bit.
but even if you did that, I could show you sweep and then put it back in my hand, shuffle my hand back around and then put the card down, or do I need to like have the revealed card out
As far
like
as I know,
during the strike?
you don't have the real card doesn't have to be revealed. They just know that there's a sweep in your hand now.
Okay. Gotcha.
And I haven't been told otherwise.
Okay. And
Uh,
so generally you are looking to just put a your biggest damage card on it, and that's probably going to be sweep that you're revealing.
Usually sweep is the big one, spike is another big one, but a
Sure.
lot of times, believe it or not, like I think that's what I thought at first. And if you have the option to, absolutely, turn your grasp into a sweep. It's
Right.
totally fine. But a lot of times you're setting up a range. So
Right.
don't be afraid. Like you use it for guidance engine as well. Don't be afraid at range 4 to reveal an assault.
Right. So to specifically to set up a range. And I mean most of the time for like all of these, more is better. But for guidance ascension in particular, you
Right.
might not want 5. You might want 4 exactly.
Exactly. So if we're at 4 and I reveal an assault, right?
Right.
Now this, and this are all online.
Yeah.
So it's like, am I going to get push or pulled too? Am I going to get DP'd? Am I going to, just because this one especially is real nice because you're not really losing your action because you're at +2,
Right.
right?
And
Um,
and and this one doesn't get the range benefit, but that's fine. It was already going to hit here, and now they have to worry about so many other things.
right, yeah, because like all of these hit now, and you've created a range 3 mix up at range 4, like I said before.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
hmm So
All
like
right. So
bigger
so
isn't
so
necessarily better. If your opponent knows is they're dancing around guidance ascension,
right.
setting up exact range for guidance ascension is big. Like you
Sure.
can really kind of play with them in that regard.
Sure.
But for the most part, I don't usually. It usually winds up just being force, or if I have a setup that just I fall into it, right?
Right.
I'll
So
try and set up for a big finish.
so
Um,
the triage in that case is like force first, and then if you have the boost, play the boost. If you have the attack, play the attack.
right, right. It's
Okay.
versatile in that regard, but for the most part, it's you don't be. Well, I guess I should say don't be afraid to change it.
Right.
Right? Don't be
Right.
afraid to use it for force
So
at
and that
all.
and that applies to both uh the card itself and also the 3 gauge that you would be spending as the attack, right? Use that as
Right,
force too.
that's what you have to. Yeah, it's because especially because like this is one the binding beatitude you're more likely to strike with, and you only need
Okay.
2 for that. Because
Right.
we'll get that in a minute, but because this it's got 3 armor on it, 3 gauge. This is like a mini block.
Right.
Worst case scenario because it still also returns to your hand.
Sure, sure.
Um, but yeah, for complete servitude, it is a really good finisher if if you've done it.
Right.
If you've gotten to that point, like if we're at a point where we're just like, oh boy, we're just a slugfest, we're low on cards, and I got Gauge. Now this is just a prominent threat.
Right.
Um, but you have to get that maximum range. So obviously you want to juice it up. Uh, if we're at this range, that's when you would boost something like this, and now you threaten.
Right.
So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Man, you just threaten a casual 9 damage at range 6.
Sure. And they have to address it in you got value out of it even if you don't actually play it.
Exactly. Yeah. So they're probably not going to strike at that point unless they eat a block. Cool. I mean, that's a lot of resources on them too. But if
Right.
they move in, now you have extra gauge.
Yep.
And now depending on how far they moved in, you're also at +2 power.
Yep.
So like it's kind of a win-win. It's a threat at range, but if they move in, it's okay to do something with it.
Okay.
Um,
Makes sense to me.
yeah. And the boost, again, going to power 6 with like a sweep or power 5 with a spike, don't be afraid to go lower.
Right.
You can use it to set up exact things. So like even if you're using it with this, like I said the power 6 throw, right? Or you just throw them to the edge of the world. Maybe you
Right.
don't need to throw them that far. Maybe you only need to throw them 2 or 3.
Right. Oh, yeah,
You can
sure. To
even
set up
reveal a
something
3
else.
and you set up something else with it. Yeah.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, it took me a little while to realize that. I'm like, oh, because Unga Bunga, big number,
Right.
uh, which everyone loves hitting with whatever for whatever. So like, but whatever you really like, a power 6 cross, sure, that's really good.
Yep.
Um, but then you're losing out on your superior. A
Right.
power 6 grasp, which actually we didn't really talk about grasp. I believe it or not, I boost with grasp at range 1 more than I throw it.
I was actually going to ask about the normals boost. How about we cover the last ultra and then I then we
Well,
can
yeah,
talk about
that's kind of what I figured. All right,
yeah, we
so
can talk
that's
about
complete
these.
servitude.
Yeah, I'll get them out.
This this is one of her like staple cards in my opinion. This is one of her like I don't want to say kit defining cards. There isn't a single thing on here I consider bad. Right,
Okay.
3 straight down the board. So it's a little slow, but it's got a lot of guard on it and 3 armor. It costs 2 gauge, which is great. But the big thing is both abilities have after you may return this card to your hand,
Yeah.
which is fantastic. We've already, I've talked about the boost on it and how like it's the phone on prep. I get
Yep.
+1 power, draw 2 cards, balls in
And
your court.
this is like the most free thing she can do. Like she loves this.
Yeah, absolutely. You see that in your opening hand, you go cool. Even
Okay.
on turn 1, you just throw it down and go, all right, I got 6 cards in my hand.
Right. In the
Typically, it's
in
not going to be great because you'd rather just strike because there's no reason not to. But unless you
it
want to specifically want to waste their turn,
yeah. And like before we went on the air dark, like I mentioned that I didn't know much about Phonon. I've played Phonon against Phonon a couple times and I learned to really be afraid of this. So even
yes,
I as a newbie know that Baroque noise is cool.
yep, it is. It is absolutely fantastic. That's one of the cards where like, okay, they you eat, like I said, you eat a tech, so you eat a block or a dive.
Yep.
Cool, that's fine. Now and against season 6, it's a tech hit, and even season 7 that they're probably going to cancel into it. It's going to be a lot harder because
Right.
now you're definitely on the back foot. But that's where you have some options to handle it, but you kind of it's still fine.
Sure.
Especially losing a block is great. Losing a dive in the other seasons is also great. That's
Yep.
just less options to move in. Um, and then even like I've at times, like I said before, I've used it as a block before, where I'm like even at range 1 or 2, where I'm like I just don't really have anything, and they go, I'm going to do this big thing. I just bank on the fact like I don't think you're doing 6 damage. I'm just
Right.
gonna I'll spend 2 gauge and
And take less damage and recur this for later.
get this back later, boost it on my turn, and
Right.
then like, can you do it again?
Right.
Right. I get 2 cards, and now, we're still at this close range. Now I threaten my sweep. I threaten, potentially guidance ascension. Like there's more options that are available. Like
Right.
typically is don't be afraid to use it as an emergency block.
Right.
Especially because, like I said, season 6 typically has a lot of extra gauge.
Sure.
Um, and you're really not losing anything besides the 2 gauge.
Sure. So you play it, you spend the 2 gauge, it comes back to your hand. You're not uh because you're not hitting, you don't even have the option to add it to your gauge. But even if you
If you
did
miss,
hit,
it still bounces back.
yeah,
Yeah.
it still bounces back. You might not want to um bring it to your gauge either way because you have an overage and you just want to block again later. You can for another 2 gauge.
hmm
Okay.
And there have been times, especially like if you're late in the game and they're
Yeah,
not moving in, they're just being stubborn. You just throw
just
it. You just play that game.
yeah, you just need 3 armor a couple of times and you'll win some trades.
hmm It's
Okay.
really depending on where you're at. Again, go back to Sagat because we have a local player who plays Sagat a lot.
Yeah.
This is totally fine in a low Tiger shot.
Yeah. So this is kind of your default gauge payout then.
Yeah,
It's not a backbreaking thing, but you're happy to spend 2 gauge at a time to
to do
recur
some
this a
chip
few times.
damage to recur it. Yeah.
Okay.
Most times though, I will be boosting it because as we've said, that anyone can look at that boost and go, "Oh,
Right. Yeah, that's scary.
yeah,"
Over the course of a game, that can be very, very annoying.
because that is one. Unlike resonance, you will get your power and
Yep.
then it'll bounce to your hand because resonance is on hit. This is an after effect,
Yes. Right.
which is very strong.
Okay.
Like boosting at 2 now turns on, like I said, guidance ascension. Boosting it at you know 4 turns on, you know, or boosting at 3 or 4 turns on a bunch of other stuff. Like it's a very just +1 power all the time is really good. And the big thing that I learned to really use it for is if I'm at +1 power in my turn anyway, and I think they're in a bad position, there's no reason not to just boost it.
Right.
because I still have my range advantage. I still have my +1 power. If you pass
Yeah.
the turn to me, I'm going to punish you for it.
Yeah, and cool. Now you have plus 2 or 3 power on your turn.
Exactly. Yeah, and
Okay.
especially on my flip side, and then I might, you know, if you move into, you know, we're here or whatever, you close into here. I'm on my flip side. I still have this broke noise out.
Right.
You know, now I step to here and I hit you with tuning satisfaction for 5, and I push you to here
Yeah.
or whatever. Right? Like it's or help you if you move into range 3. You know, say we're here or whatever. You move into 3, like Ryu just steps in, and then I go here and hit you with a guidance ascension.
Yeah.
Like it's just overall there's nothing bad about this boost. It's just
Right.
it's one of her economic cards. It's power overall. It's like suppressive restriction in that regard. It's just 2 cards, 1 damage.
And
Right.
it also means like so one of the things that you were saying is when you get them to range, now you can use that opportunity to reload a little bit. This could be your reload, but
Exactly. And it
it
usually is.
yeah, but it also means that if you're doing this kind of in the mix earlier on to threaten power with it and stuff, when you are at range, you might have enough cards, and then you can boost with something else and be threatening with it.
Exactly. Yep.
Right. I gotcha. Okay, so
Because
yeah.
and that's what I was saying earlier is Phonon isn't really a range person. Say we end up in this situation, right?
Right.
She doesn't really have anything that hits here. That's like
Right.
the big secret with Phonon is like if you want to be safe from her, you can just run away
Right.
because a lot of her stuff isn't going to hit. The problem is if you run away and you don't have an answer for that, she can make stuff hit.
Right. Eventually, and it'll be faster and more punishing. It'll take less time to set up, and it will be more punishing than what you confront if you keep on trying to range her out,
Exactly.
unless
So
you're a
like say
specific
say
kind of
you did
character.
go to this range here. First thing I would do is I would boost that because now I draw
Right.
2 cards, and then now the ball's in your court
Yep.
because now I'm at +3 power. If you don't move,
Yep.
so I will be able to hit you on the next turn.
Right.
So there's a lot of setup, and Phonon really needs to know where her ranges are and what her numbers are.
Yes.
And you have to think not just on your next turn, but on your next turn. You know what I mean? Uh,
Oh,
so
sure.
I look
Yeah.
at this as either like at this range, I look at this as +3 power
Yep.
because typically I don't think anyone's going to be striking at this range. But if they're here, the mix up is a lot stronger because all right, you assault in, I clock you for 7 with sweep,
Right.
or you want to spike me, I still have I'm not going to break you, but I push you out. Now that really does anything with that, but like it's just enough to set up the ranges that need to be there.
It's
Really though,
it's still super playable here. It's just it doesn't make things hit all the way out like it would if they were at big ranges.
what it does though is if you're at range 3 and you boost it,
Yeah,
this
now
hits
you
at EX now.
suddenly have guidance ascension on
Um,
more ranges that you might want.
yeah, EX guidance ascension at a 3, sure,
Yep.
it's really good. Um, but I mean, even at 3, typically at 3, you're probably just going to be striking because you want the advantage on 3 for the mix up in most
Sure.
cases, just because you just throw this, you beat their assault, like you beat every range option at 3 with this. So there's
Yeah.
no reason if you have it in hand, not to do that.
Yep.
So, but it's still nothing. If you really need to, if you're going to prep anyway, just throw that down because they
Yeah.
either waste their turn boosting around it, or then you can play something safe. You can just play this because you get, you move them 2, you draw 2 cards. Effectively, you've drawn 4 cards between the 2 of them.
Yeah. All right. So
This
so
is
so
still safe.
so that's kind of where her economy is coming from then, is stuff like that.
These 2 cards here are
Okay.
really her economy cards. But anytime you boost is really economy because you're setting up your ranges and you're setting up your following turn. When you boost, obviously you draw a card.
Yep. Yep.
And you're still typically you're making your opponent's turn worse for them,
Right.
which is really what the toxicity you can do with Phonon.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. So in terms of the economic game, your cards are coming from here and here. Your gauge is going to like seems like kind of whatever you want it to. Like if you
Exactly.
if
Wherever if you need to move, move. If
yep,
you need to exceed,
yep.
exceed.
The,
Typically, I
there
would exceed with 2. Like I want to exceed at 3 so I can keep 2 backups just in case.
you can keep on hitting with your character ability if you want to, right?
right? And then you
But
still have your binding beatitude, and then if
right,
for some reason like you're in a good spot to hit with complete servitude, you can pitch a
right.
card from your hand and strike.
But
Uh,
you're not like Akuma or Chun-Li where okay, the first 2 or 3 gauge that you have are earmarked for exceeding or earmarked for this big ultra. Like no, you can be pretty flexible with all your stuff.
correct. Yeah, like you don't if they're just moving in at you and like you're comfortable at your ranges, there's no need to exceed. If
Yeah.
a lot of times though, I'll use her exceed side if I'm playing against someone super aggressive, right?
Yep.
Where every turn they're just striking, just strike, 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 strike.
Yeah.
You
So
exceed, and
then
you can put more
you'll
pressure on them.
you'll get the +2 power even when they have been striking every turn.
Right, exactly. Which
Makes sense.
can really make and can really make things go. And then it comes to a point where like they run out of gas, they don't strike,
Right.
and now you got a movement on top of it, and they go, oh,
Right.
and like it gets real bad for them. Like, um, someone like a trying to like a wild swing character or something, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Where
Somebody
it's
who can
just
just keep that pressure and wants to keep that pressure.
right, and then you just return in kind with like, okay, well here we go. And
Right.
then if they get to a point where like they whiff or they go, oh, I'm gonna prep because I hit a spot I didn't want to be at, and then you're already on your exceed side. You take big advantage of it. You reset to your range that you want,
Right.
and then you can, if you need to, if you get a range they don't like, you revert back. And don't be afraid to revert. Um, like I've reverted with complete servitude because now I just have 2/4 sitting my gauge whenever I need it.
Right.
And nothing
Yeah.
wrong
It's,
with that.
it's just turn into a force bank.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, that'll make sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's kind of the kit. Let's go through some normals really quick, and then I have a question about counterplay, and then I think we can probably wrap it up.
Cool. Sounds good.
Yeah. So you mentioned you like boosting with grasp, and just as a blanket statement beforehand, so we don't have to go through all of these in detail. Like first off, your ability works with your normals,
With normals, yeah.
and as you mentioned, oftentimes because her printed power is quite low, the really big hits that she's doing are coming from her normals.
Right. Exactly. Like the big boogeyman with Phonon is like, oh, I'm just gonna move into range one, and then all of a sudden you eat 8 damage from a sweep. You're just like,
Yeah,
oh,
sure.
oh, my back. Right.
Right. All the times, and the +2 power in particular matters especially for sweep because everything else doesn't really change breakpoints. But if I can't imagine how you could ever have +3 power with Phonon. But if you did, assault
Assault break sweep.
is suddenly a much bigger deal, and
Right.
you can leverage that as well. But
Right.
just so that we don't need to litigate, like okay, these normals are good for just as a blanket statement. Play them as normals, but with +2 power often.
Right. There's nothing wrong with that. Even a +2 power cross is totally fine.
Sure, but
Resets if
then
you're in a position.
but then
But
anything on top of that, that like the use cases that I'm not thinking of that would change. That's the kind of stuff that I think is definitely valuable
it's
to talk
important.
about. Yeah, so
Right.
tell me about those
So
and
again, well, we
and the
can
boosts, obviously.
right. So season six has very unique boosts. Oops.
Yep.
Season six is very unique boosts. And respect is very interesting. Keep turning it. So when you get to one,
Mm,
respect is very good. So you could, I could power 8 sweep, or I could just cross up, you know,
yep.
to range 3 again.
Get out of the corner or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah, that's mostly what you're going to use it for. Because like this is a position where Phonon really doesn't like, or even like this isn't like if I'm here, I will probably grasp him to here.
Right.
That's when I would use it. But if the
To
tables are turned, like if I'm here,
to give them
I'm
more
okay.
room to be pushed.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And then use the respect to get out, and then the ball's in their court. Like if they move to one, are you going to give me some cards? Are you going to strike? Because I still have the tuning satisfaction. If you assault in, they could have just assaulted in, right? And then like
Yep.
I've been on the back foot, and then I can get myself out.
Yep.
I think it is definitely something to consider because otherwise you're doing 4 or 5 damage, which is fine. Like +1 or 2 power grasp is totally fine. But don't be afraid to use the respect because a lot of times in season 6, what do? It's the opposite. You respect in. Like
Sure.
I've seen a lot of plays where that's your turn one play.
Yeah.
Um, just to get or usually it's like here for season 2. Don't be afraid to use it at one to reposition yourself because season 2 does not have, or season 6 rather doesn't have advance 3, right? They have close or retreat
Right.
on
On assault on air
assault. Yeah.
dash. Yeah.
Yep. So sometimes you just need to get the other side of them. Grasp is your answer to that because it is
Okay.
advanced 3.
Yep.
And you set up to range 3. Going defensively at range 3 with no boost, not great. But you could have. There have been situations where, like, all right, I say I have this boosted. They've moved in. As tempting as it would be to grasp at 6, they know I have this out. They moved in and they were okay with it.
They clearly have a DP or something.
Right. There's something spooky going on.
Yeah.
We're gonna reset to here.
Yep.
And then do they have it again? I don't know. But now we're back in the range 3 mix up, and I potentially have another boost out if it was there to begin with.
Sure.
It's just
Yeah.
don't be afraid to boost respect at close range
Okay.
instead of throwing the grass for the safety. Because otherwise, what is grass? It's a positional tool, right? It doesn't typically do a lot of damage. You can snap
Right.
break some other things with it. It gives you a gauge.
Right.
We don't really care too much. The rest of
Right.
our kit does that anyway. The
Do
movement is very strong.
so the start of your next turn, draw 2 and discard this. That's cool, but
That is
really,
just an added bonus. If they pass the
yeah,
turn to you and you draw 2 cards and you get +2 power,
yeah.
neat.
That's you're already hoping that they're passing the turn to you anyway, so just that's a bonus on
If
top
they
of it.
pass the turn to you at range 3 when you move,
Right.
like,
They probably
you've won.
they probably won't, but if they do,
It yeah,
cool. Yeah.
excellent, fantastic. It's
Right.
if I have EX tuning satisfaction in hand, that is also like one of the big things. Like, I'll go here, I will just EX this at range 3 all day,
Sure. You got
and
4
like,
copies
oh
of it.
yeah, exactly. Don't be afraid. Even though you get the advantage on it, don't be afraid to, because on EX it's another DP, right? It's strength. It's got a push. It's speed 6
Yep.
at range. Cool. I guess it's not really DP. I guess is range 1 defensive, speed
Yeah,
7.
it's
I
like
guess range 2.
a whirl. I think we call it if you're playing it at 3. It's like
Oh, at 3 especially.
yeah,
Yeah,
like Cyrus's title whirl or something. But yeah,
yeah. But it's really good EX defensive, and like you can set that up with respect if you have
with
it.
respect, sure.
Yeah. Um, and it's kind of like a flex. Was like, yeah, I had the grasp. I'm gonna go out here. What do you
Right,
got?
but I didn't need it, but I
Right,
did have it.
right.
Okay.
Because then even this is totally safe to set up. You've moved over here. You've drawn a card. If they want to come and attack, you just do this. And you push them to a range that maybe you throw them into the corner, and you have a cross or something.
Yep.
You draw some extra cards. Like it's you got to look at what the plays are, and most times with Phonon, you're going to find that respecting at 1 as opposed to throwing the grasp is the right play. Not always. Um,
Yeah,
Sometimes a grasp is a grasp.
you need to like represent the mix up, right? You need to show that you will play grasp if they
Right.
aren't respecting it.
Right, because then they can move into 1, and they go, okay, there's a grasp down. You could have had the other grasp in hand, and you throw it defensively, and they go, he had it.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
But I mean, if you have EX in hand, you have EX in hand. That's just exceed.
Sure.
Yeah. So moving on the line, we go to assault.
Yep.
This is an interesting one for Phonon because the retreat 3 is very good.
Mm-hmm.
Because if if we're at 1, that puts you to 4, and Phonon really likes being at 4.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and not very rarely will I close with it. Because it's not like an up to like run is. It's an all or nothing.
Yeah, it's what
Typically, this is
you
gonna
have to move exactly 3.
right because of the boost on cross. Actually, I should have gone to cross. Let me do that first.
Sure.
Phonon on the way. Speed curve. Uh,
Yeah.
Cross is cross is cross, right? He's played at 2, it's pretty much unbeatable, right? For just in general, like
Yeah, it
it's your staple,
it's like the default metric we have for unbeatable and exceed. Like if it can beat cross, that means it's special somehow.
right? Exactly. Like I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier, like a cross catcher is typically
Sure.
something that's got 3 or 4 gauge that hits at range 5,
Sure.
right? Because you move out and then I still got hit,
Yep.
or sometimes a cross catch might be your opponent can't move, something like that, right?
Yep. Yep.
Um, Cross is a very powerful tool for Phonon because again, it puts you at range. But I would play it at 1 more than I'd play it at 3, I think, unless or 2 rather, unless I think they're not going to have anything because now I've given up my turn
And
at this range and I don't have a
you're
setup.
you're at 5 and you can't actually hit back.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Because even if I just raw EX this, I'm still only hitting at 4.
Right.
With any of my 3 X's, I should say. I can hit with this, which is fine. But typically you're going to want to boost it because it sets up your other ranges really well. You get a little like This with EX, like with cross out, is very good
Mhm.
because now you're at 8 total guard.
You're not being stunned by anything in the world. That means it's coming back to your hand. You're doing 4. You've got
You
a
beat
7
Spike
delta on it. Yeah,
defensively.
that's
Yeah, like
fine.
it's totally fine.
Yep.
So the boost, as I mentioned before, the boost, turns this into disgusting on defense at
Yep.
2.
Yep.
Even this, you get, once again, you're up to 8 guard again.
Hmm.
You get your move 2 on there, draw 2. This goes up to, 6 guard, power
Yep.
from 4. Like it's just a very overall very strong
But
boost. It makes this 5 speed.
but
So
it,
on
it
curve at 3.
it seems like the big target though is Guidance Ascension,
Oh,
right? Like
absolutely. Like that's your boogeyman that you threaten
yeah,
with.
that's the big scary one. But almost everything benefits from an EX, and it means you don't have to get rid of the other copy. It's just that it's on cross, and cross is good to play too.
Cross is very good. Yeah.
Yep.
So the thing is, you don't have to worry about cross on their side, so they're not
Right.
going to be moving out, right?
Right.
So segueing that into the assault,
Hmm.
this is your cross.
Sure.
So now you're here, you use that to go to backup.
You use that to back up instead because you're probably not going to be advancing in with assault
Hmm.
unless you're looking for advantage. Which, if only you had other ways to get advantage.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Um, and the nice thing is, if you're using that to go out, you kind of condition them because even if you happen to get extra power, like you have this boosted, as you mentioned
Mhm.
before, a power 7 assault is very good.
Sure.
It breaks
And if
sweet.
and if they're not playing cross ever because they're not leaving, you can play it at 2.
Exactly.
Yeah, I get you.
It's very safe at 2. Like you just go, bam, you hit them, and then
Right.
you hit them for even 5 is fine.
Yep.
You one delta on sweep is totally fine,
Yep.
right? They focus. Cool, they focused you. Well done. That's one focus gone.
That's one focus gone.
Um,
That's the
mhm.
Phonon mantra, is that's one focus gone.
Exactly. Yeah. If they do it at 4, like I said, I've seen people throw focus at 4 on Phonon just
Sure.
because they don't feel like going into the corner, they don't feel like getting
Getting
extra pushed
thrown.
out. But
Yep.
the downside to that is, if I reveal for advantage, I still have this other one.
Yep.
I'll just push you back anyway,
Yeah,
but
just do it
they'll
again.
take less damage from it. Yeah. Um, which is very funny. But yeah, an assault I will typically use to back up, but an assault is just very good at 3. It enhances the range 3 gameplay.
Mhm.
Um, EX assault is very good on defense for Phonon because assault is very good against Phonon.
Yep.
Um, just in general because you get in and you have advantage. That's the key thing. So like walking in is bad because now you just pass to Phonon with fierce
Right.
effectively, right?
Right.
But if you
But
assault in,
assaulting in gives you the turn, which means that you can actually pressure her.
right, exactly. So if they're at
Yeah.
3 and you think they're going to assault in, you can EX assault. You beat their assault, and now you dictate it where you
Right.
want to be. Like this is a very powerful EX for assault for defensive purpose, or
Right.
for Phonon, I should say.
Right.
Um, which I mean, it's just a very good defensive option. Period.
Right. But not everybody loses to assault as hard as Phonon does, which means that it has kind of extra value for her.
Right, exactly. Because even a
Yep.
lot of the season 6 characters don't, assault is assault. Because the longer your turn goes or your opponent's turn goes in season 6, the less you get to use your own stuff.
True.
For Fauna in particular, if you can advantage chain, like if Lychee gets a good assault off, it's pretty much game over for Phonon, right?
Yeah.
Because then now she's bouncing Matembo off her head all day, and it
Right.
gets very hard.
Right. If she can't
Um,
take her turn, then she's got some real problems.
right. Which especially in this regard, that is when cross becomes a big, like that's when I would cross at 1,
Yep.
especially.
Yep.
Um, like if they assault in, because if they grasp whatever, like they're probably not going to grasp you because you still sweep, you have suppressive restriction online, or even sliding affliction. Like you have options against grasp. It's not super great indoor. Um, I crossing at 1 it puts you at 4.
Yep.
Crossing at 1 defensively puts you at 4
Yep.
on
And
your
you're
turn.
and you're happy there.
Yeah, exactly. That is 3-4, 3 on offense, 4 on defense. Yeah, and offense is a happy place for Phonon for sure.
Yep.
So that's what I do with a cross. That's why like defensively you go to 4 is great.
Yep.
Um, if you're at 2, threaten threat guidance engine or whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, but going to 5 depending on who you're playing against if you don't think they have an option and you feel safe enough. then you're just playing the regular pass the turn, right?
Right. But if you possibly can, make sure that one of your many things that could hit at range 5 does hit at range 5, or that you can set it up quickly.
Right, right.
Right.
That's the gamble going down there.
Yep.
Dive is dive. I'm
Yep.
going to move on.
Sure.
Dive this season has your reading. Typically, Phonon doesn't need to read
Mhm.
unless they move in and you think there's something scary going on.
Yep.
Uh, like we mentioned earlier, we're like, okay, I'm going to go here. Normally, okay, I'm gonna grasp out because
Yeah.
I
Respect
have this
out.
boosted. And you're doing something scary. I can go, okay. They
Right.
moved in. What do they have? What am I afraid of? You can go, okay, we're at range 1. I'm just gonna read your spike and we're just gonna diffuse the situation.
Yep.
Right? I mean, it's
And
reading. There's so many different calls for reading, and
yeah, it
it's
reading should probably be its own lesson in this guide at some point.
exactly
Um,
there are entire videos on reading in general.
sure. But just like with blowback or with Muniel, you can't do reading and also get your character ability.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. So that's it's reading in this for phone on a lot of cases is a diffusal situation, or like if it's the end of the game, you have grasp in hand, they're at 1.
Sure.
You read grasp and
You're
grasp,
just
right? Like you're using
trying to close the
basic
game.
reading stuff at that point. So in most cases, if with phone on, if you're going to be reading, it's more to diffuse a situation
Yep.
or to see what they have in their hand,
Yep.
right? Which is again, that's basic reading theory at that point. Like, okay, name something you're afraid of. If I read something at 4, I could read anything at 4. I could read spike at 4 and strike with tuning satisfaction,
Sure.
right? Like, I don't care if you have a spike. Cool. I now see what's in your hand and you're at range 5.
Yep.
Like, what are you gonna do? What are they gonna do? They're probably gonna pitch all the everything out in their hand and move in,
Yep.
which is okay with me.
So I mean, and what that basically says is that the reading made them discard, and that's a cool boost too, right?
Hmm.
That's an okay upside.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, reading, like I said, you can do entire videos on reading. For phone on though, typically,
Yep.
in most cases, you're gonna try and diffuse something.
Sure.
If you get into a
And
boost war, read something that you can beat.
and
That's reading.
dive. I feel like you have plenty of range 4 options that you don't need to dive in on,
Right.
and you're not really wanting to advance anyway. It seems like.
In most cases. However, sometimes you just have to let them know that you can hit them for 7 on will.
Yep. Yep.
Like,
Very true.
uh, if you if Phonon throws an EX on turn 1, I would EX dive on turn 1 with Phonon because it's really what are
Yep.
they gonna do? Cross out?
Right.
That's probably the only time you'd cross against Phonon.
Right.
Um, but then that cross loses the tuning satisfaction, and then they're down a cross.
Yep.
Right. So it's a weirdly safe play on turn 1, and it also catches a lot of people off. And I say EX because unless you boost the tuning satisfaction and then dive, so you're not actually EXing. Now at that point, you beat their focus.
Right.
Like anything, they're gonna like, oh, I'm gonna stand here and take it, and they go, oh
Right.
boy,
Yeah.
that's 8 damage.
Yeah. Her power and her boosts are not built around having 5 printed power on the attack that they're going with, right? Like
Exactly.
this is a big hit for her.
Right. And like you said before, the advantage is you are moving in, or the
Right.
disadvantage rather is you are moving in,
Right.
which also is kind of a mind game for your opponent because now you've moved in. You've said,
Sure.
I'm okay being here. What you
Yeah.
got?
Yeah. I mean, if you've got a handful of normals, if you've got sweep and focus as the other cards in your hand, and then EX dive on turn 1, you're like, okay, let's go here.
Yep. Even
And
if you're calling, you could call it. They don't have a grasp in hand. You could also threaten guidance.
yeah.
Right. You just
Yep.
go in and be like, here's a bunch of damage, or you throw it at 3.
Yep.
It was also incredibly valid.
Sure. Yeah.
Um,
EX or regular, both are good for
mhm.
dive at 3.
Yep, because at 3, they're probably not going to throw focus because who
Yep.
wants to get, spiked for 7
Spiked. Totally. And as you mentioned, and I'm sure we'll get to just in a second, that spike for Phonon is real good.
is very good. Yep, because it's like, oh, I think you're going to block. That is one time I would read. I would read like a block or something if I was going to spike them, which I mean,
Sure.
that's just reading, right?
Sure. Sure.
Um, but yeah, like a dive at 3 is very strong because she has
Right.
very strong mix-ups, and people just aren't typically going to expect, Phonon to fly over them and dome them for 7 or 8 damage.
Definitely.
Um, And then, at that point, even hitting for 6, you're not getting hit back. Totally fine. The only thing you're going to be breaking, like, there's nothing you need to break because unless you're doing 8, they're still going to draw cards off focus.
Right.
Um, So yeah, dive. Don't be afraid to throw the dive, but just don't be wild about it. Like it's 7 damage is 7 damage.
Yep.
um. So yeah, now we're going into the spike. Fun on spikes hit like a truck.
Yep.
Um, because
Which
depending on what gets past you, 6, 7, or 8 damage,
sure.
just like
Yeah.
dive.
Pretty
And in this
pretty
case, if
reliably.
they exactly, spike becomes incredibly terrifying with resonance.
Oh yeah.
Because now it's a speed 5 spike.
Yep.
Uh, on offense at that. So like it beats pretty much everything.
Yep.
And again, we've pointed out they're not going to cross out because you're going to have your +2 power. If they cross out, you're probably going to catch them anyway.
Hmm.
Um, because your tunings, like literally all of your attacks catch their cross anyway. So
Right. So
like
if it's basically it's like it's not like a spike assault mix up. It's a spike everything mix up.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
If resonance gets past you, they your opponent is well probably made a mistake, but has also just accepted the fact that they're probably just going to eat a bunch of damage and they're probably preparing for later.
Right.
Because that's a speed 7 or a speed 5 power 7 spike.
Right.
It's just backbreaking.
Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah, it's incredibly good.
Okay.
Um, and then this returns to your hand. You're just kind of like, well, there we are.
Yep.
um, and the other one is Mix Up. It's a
Yep.
very, very good boost for season 6.
Yeah.
I know I've used it many times. Like Lynn is another character I play. So many times I've gone, whoop, here's my flash. You know,
Yeah.
I'll hop over them and be like, all right, what you got? Here's my you can't hit me now.
Yep.
Um, with Phonon, a lot of times, like if I'm in the corner or they're in the corner, like if there's somewhere, I will use it as a reposition for myself
Mm.
more so than the strike. It's just to get myself where I need to be
Right.
because it is close to
And
retreat one.
right. And so you can't go over them, but you
Right,
can just
right, right.
shift stuff
Yeah,
around.
you step
Sure.
back and do your thing. Yeah.
Sure.
So,
Uh,
um, yeah, right. I'm thinking season 7, whereas you do the crossover. Yeah, yeah, yeah. For this, like
so
if I'm at 3, and I don't think like they might have something really good at 3, I'll just step back to 4, and then
yep.
I'm really comfortable, and I throw a tuning satisfaction or whatever.
Sure.
Or if I have Baroque boosted and I'm at 3, I'll step in, and now I threaten guidance
Yep.
at 2, which maybe I want them in the corner in this regard, right? So now we're at 4, they can't really go anywhere. They have to come into me. I could have at this point in the game, maybe I have sweep online, or maybe I have something online where I want them in the corner to keep them at this range.
Sure. Situational, but not. There's a lot of situations where this is useful. This is just a versatile boost for almost everybody. Mix up
Very
is.
versatile boost. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
There have been times, right, that we talked about before. We have this up, right? We have this boost.
Yep.
Um, I've been in a situation where, I was here or maybe even here.
Yep.
But typically I was here and I would mix up
Mix up for gauge and then
for
servitude
gauge
them.
and then throw servitude or something at them, or
Right.
even just like binding beatitude, right? You go
Sure.
from 1 gauge. No one looks at like on your opponent's turn. They go, okay, he's got 1 gauge. I'm not really looking at an ultra or whatever. And you
Right.
go, okay, I'll step back. Now I have 2 gauge and now I'll strike. They're
Yeah.
probably not going to expect that.
Right.
But the problem is like this one doesn't really break anything.
Yeah.
Uh,
it's not a
it's 3 damage, doesn't push. It's speed 3. Like you're
right.
probably just gonna get trucked in return for it. That's not a great example,
Right.
but it's a diffusion situation where it's like, okay, if I'm going to like, I'm not gonna hit them anyway. If I'm gonna throw this to as a tech anyway, I'm just gonna step into it,
Sure.
right? And just hope they don't break me, and I get some return this to my hand, and
Some value out of it. Sure.
yeah, exactly. But I
Okay.
mean, mix up is mix up. It's it's an additional tool. It does exactly what it says it does. If you go to
Right.
2 and you step back to 3, now you have your standard. Even without plus power, you're in your standard range 3 mix up,
Yep.
right? Or if I'm at 3, I could step into 2 to cross, to cross to 5.
Yep.
It's totally fine. Um,
So
Not that I would use those 2 valuable cards, but
it just lets you initiate a strike on your turn. You can't use it with your character ability, but it's valuable for that reason.
right, exactly. And like if I'm on this side, maybe I don't want to use it. I don't
Right.
want to get rid of anything in my hand,
Right.
to like revert over. Which is rare because if I need to, I could just throw the spike down, flip, and throw something else.
Right.
Um, you can also confuse people when if you step in with her ability and throw the spike at range 2.
Sure.
Gets a lot of people, but anyway. Yeah, no, mix up. Just use it to. It really depends on what you have in your hand. Like, there's so many variables that it could be because it's just such a versatile thing.
Sure.
Um, yeah, position yourself where you need to be.
Yep.
And then we get to sweep.
I
I
feel like
think we've talked about
I feel like for both of these, it's like stable defensive cards on a character who doesn't have a lot of them is super valuable anyway.
right.
Sweep obviously has the bonus of breaking everything in the game when you put your ability on it, which is
Exactly.
awesome.
Yeah, you have the benefit, the real benefits of EX sweep. Well, I guess you beat Spike,
Right.
um, but otherwise, like you beat on offensive, you beat their sweep in most cases.
Yeah.
Which is just in of itself really strong. And if you have the +2, you also beat their focus.
Yes.
Like it's incredibly strong. And as we, as you said before, each Photon just accepts that there's a focus. And if
Yep.
this is one of the things in her kit that beats focus,
Yep.
which is just being able to throw a normal and beat focus without any resources is
Yeah.
incredible.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Like if there was anything to be done, like if Phonon's kit were to be changed at all, uh, you could make the argument that her ability shouldn't apply to normals,
Mm,
or maybe just +1 to normals.
right. Just to
Um,
make this one interaction a little bit less powerful.
right, because it
Right.
is incredibly powerful. Because like the weakness that she was to have is like, okay, you close in on it, and then she still has a very strong normals game.
Sure, sure.
Um, very few instances will I boost the sweep. Um, it's very rare. Like it's if I need that 3 armor for
Right.
something like maybe for at range 1, and like I know they have an EX, you know, grasp up or something, or I know they have something weird that like I know can like beat me in some regard.
Right.
I'm okay boosting that, and
But
like
but sweep is too good. Most of the time
it
you're
is
just like,
most
well,
of the
all right.
time.
Yeah.
The joke being as my friend says, season 6 has the most EX sweeps of any season.
Yeah. No, between superior and a very playable sweep without light
Right,
on it, you're
right,
doing
because
fine.
yeah, right. That's the big thing. The other seasons, like okay, +2 speed versus sweep is a very real thing to consider.
That's actually
Um,
a real conversation. In this case, it's kind of not.
right, like it's just so like you play that. Like I would play this into a focus, right? If we're like it's like last turn of the game and we're just in the slugfest. I got like
Sure.
2 health
Yeah.
left, and
Plus,
yeah,
here's 5
here's 5
armor.
armor. Right, we'll
Just hit
just
me.
right,
Right.
let's make this trade. We'll see what you got.
Okay.
Most cases, just throw the sweep. Like there's very little reason not to just you have the threat, or you don't even have to throw it. You can just have it. Or as you
Right.
mentioned before with Munal here, like make anything hit for 6.
Yeah.
Right, like it's a super strong ability.
Right.
And unlike other characters like Lynn, for example, where she gets power for boosting it, or like Wagner or something like that,
Mhm.
you're not going to get that with Phonon. She doesn't have anything that really interacts with it. Just
Right.
throw the
Yeah.
sweep.
The boost that she's boosting is it's as printed. You don't get anything extra on top of it.
Exactly.
Right.
Now
Okay.
comes the focus.
Yes.
Focus, as we've talked about before, is a very strong attack. It's meant to be a very solid attack. It's meant to be quote unquote free,
Yep.
right? Like if there's a free space in bingo, focus would be in the middle.
Sure.
Um, because it's typically if something is going to beat focus, resources have to be put into it. As we've said, that's why like her sweep is very strong in that regard.
Yes.
Um, you know, you're staying where you know your opponent's not going to move you, your opponent's not going to whatever. So it's a very good attack. And even with Phonon doing 6 damage with sweep, because normally like, you know, the sweep focus delta is neutral, like take a card, draw a card, 4 damage
Right.
goes across both sides.
Right. Perfectly
Uh
symmetrical violence.
right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now with Phonon though, my focus beats your sweep.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
delta, I mean,
In terms
more
of the
delta,
trade the trade delta, yeah, it doesn't stun it, but it at least stops it.
it becomes more positive. And then my focus
Sure.
into your grasp is that much better.
Sure, sure.
Uh but there have been a lot of times I still have been trying to work out exactly why. But I think it's character dependent where I have thrown a focus and then later on gone, man, I wish I'd bailed off instead.
Mm.
Um, and really depends on the character. So, like I've mentioned, Lychee. I
Yep.
will typically try to, I think, exceed against Lychee very early.
Okay.
Uh, because she really likes setting up a very specific range. For her, I use usually like 2 and 3.
Right.
Um, because you have all green, which is just gross. You have something else at 2. Uh, but or even just grasp at 2 with Matembo, you can bouncing things around.
Sure.
Um, and being able to be like, okay, she goes, I'm going to set this up, and then Phonon goes, "Cool,
Right.
strike,"
So
and
so
she goes,
the
"Oh,
so the veil off use case is characters who are threatening something that you can't deal with at a very specific range that you're trying to footsie around, basically.
right." And, like, if you really need to exceed, and like you're looking at your gauge, you don't have a whole lot of gauge.
Right.
Like I have also like veil off can also set up your complete servitude,
Yep.
right? If you're at 2 gauge, you can veil off, and then now you have it threatened.
Yep.
Um, so you can either strike with it on your turn, or you can revert and action and strike, depending on
Sure.
how things go.
The veil off,
Um,
veil on thing.
hmm
Yep.
hmm Um, but really, if someone's being like hyper aggressive into you, you don't really lose anything because you don't have to strike them. Like, so you're gonna be time where like, man, I really need to get this extra power in. You sacrifice a turn, get your gauge, and now you're swinging +2 on all of your turn, no
Right.
matter what.
Right.
Like you're just in this grapple fest, and you're just in this beat down, and you just start whittling them down.
Right. You
Um,
need 3 power over 3 turns that you wouldn't get on your front side. So let's go. Let's make the
but
plus
really,
one
when
be
you think
plus
that'd
two
be
now.
4 power over 2 turns as opposed to, or 4 power over 3 turns instead of 3 power over 3 turns, right?
Okay.
Because you get, obviously you're not doing anything on your turn, either exceeding or your strike. If you strike,
Right.
strike, strike, it's three
Right.
power. If you exceed, strike, strike, it's 4 power.
Right.
Um,
I see what you mean. Yeah.
yeah, or if they don't strike, it's positioning, free positioning in that regard.
Yep.
Uh, so that is one of the very specific things to worry about. It's a very big consideration, which I think for a lot of season 6 characters, because I mean, focus is just such a good attack.
Yeah.
Um, and that it's more economy. Now, thankfully, Phonon doesn't need that economy because, as mentioned, he's got 2 cards that effectively let her draw 2.
Yep.
Uh,
And ultras that are cool but not like backbreakingly amazing. So play them as
right.
force.
It's not like Metsuhado, right?
Sure.
It's
Sure.
not.
Sure.
Yeah, it's
Or
not.
Matthew Shoryu. It's not a lot of season three ultras.
It's 3 ultras, right? Right. It's
Right.
not. It's not a shield boomerang. It's not.
Sure.
Whatever.
Sure.
It's cards that are good when they're good, but if you don't have them,
Right.
it's so they're like, which is I don't mind that because it's like I'm not very few times am I not tempted to like, oh, a lot of times towards the end of the game like, oh, I want to get flashy, I'm going to
Yeah.
finish you off with an ultra or whatever.
Yeah.
uh that temptation typically isn't there.
Right.
Now, me being me, I will still try to do that
You'll still
because
do it anyway because it's cool. Because look at the
because it's
art.
cool. Yeah, like if
It's
I
got a cool red card frame and stuff. But that's
yeah, exactly, it
right.
looks
Of
cool. Like
course.
so many times like, oh, I'm playing Chun-Li, which was another main of mine,
Sure.
and I'm like, oh, I want to do. I could finish you off. I want to hit you with an EX Hazanchu or whatever. Like
Yeah.
I want
Yeah.
to
Hosenko. Right.
Hosenka. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
hit you for 13 that ignores armor. Like
Right.
this is where we want to.
Yeah.
Like
This is what I'd like to do right now.
right at from range 6 or whatever. Like
Sure. Yeah.
this is where we're going. Phonon doesn't have that. I mean, funny
Yeah.
enough, she can do that, but like
But
it's not
not.
typically.
Yeah. That's not like her game closing strategy.
So it's okay to use to just pitch the card away. Like
Right.
that's totally fine.
Okay.
Not so much this one because if you're going to pitch it for cards, just boost it. You
Just
get the
boost
cards
it.
anyway.
Sure.
Yeah.
Totally.
But yeah, the focus coming down to it's a decision. It's a real decision
Right.
to consider,
Right.
especially because Spike isn't necessarily safe against Phonon,
Right.
which means focus inherently is.
Right.
Uh, so it's like it's really, really match dependent, and you'll know. It's just one of those things. You'll know if you throw your focus and later on you're like, man, I really want to exceed here, and then you go, I should
You
have
should have
bailed
veiled
off.
off earlier, right? So this is
Yeah.
an experience thing, and it's not, it's an experience thing that is important too. That like
Mhm.
you've got to drill this in as you're learning Phonon in your play style. This is something to
Right.
think about for you.
Right. And for some people, like you could be playing totally differently, right?
Yep.
You could just be going in and just playing normal phone on, which is totally fine.
Yep.
And like you run into range 1, you throw focus. Cool. Nothing wrong with that.
Totally.
Like if your turn 1 could be, you go for that power 7 dive and then on their turn you throw a focus.
Right.
That is a totally valid line of play.
Yeah.
There is nothing wrong with that. And then, you cross out on your turn
Right.
or whatever. Like that is a completely valid line of play. uh, which is really something that will throw your opponents off because a lot of their counters to your bigger range attacks, they might have lost when you threw that dive,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
If they're setting up for Phonon as you've described her, Normal's Phonon can really wreck that in particular.
right, because then later on, they might have, they could have hard mulligan for stuff to like, okay, there's this will let me get in here, this will let me do this. I can play against this, and then you go, all right, turn one. They go, and they go dive, ow.
What? Oh no.
hmm
Right.
And
Okay.
then you could even grass them into the corner,
Right.
and
And
then
that actually segues very well into the stuff I had about counterplay. That that you've described the Phonon stuff,
mhm,
and my opponent is going to be doing something to stop the Phonon stuff, but uh, Phonon needs to have answers to it. So in
right.
general, like the normals line is a good counter to what people might be prepping for when they're fighting Phonon. But what are people trying to do to deal with her other than just be aggressive?
Well, being aggressive is a very good play.
Right.
It's a very tricky thing because your instinct tells you to move in,
Sure.
right? The problem with that is you want to move in with action compression. Like mix up is
Yes.
very good into her.
Yeah.
That is something to consider.
Don't just spend your time moving in and then passing turn.
Right. You want to move in. Like if I was, say, I was playing Lynn into Phonon, I would probably never use her front side ability because now,
Okay.
yeah, you've drawn some cards, but you've closed one, you've drawn two, you've given me one card, and now you've also given me
Right.
+2 power.
Right. Sure.
Uh, like it's unless like maybe I would do it with Lynn if I moved into two because you had
Elusive
your
flash or something.
elusive flash, yeah.
Right.
But typically it's you don't want to do stuff like that.
Sure.
Um, like and then like your assault, right? You don't want to do that.
Right.
Uh, if I was playing against Phonon, mix up into assault is fantastic
Right.
because now suddenly you're in her comfortable range, and now offensively you're threatening. You beat this isn't in play, this isn't in play,
Right.
this is in play for a trade, and this is only doing 1 damage.
Right. And now I've got advantage. It's my turn. I'm in her uncomfortable range, and I can actually like push my game plan a little bit.
Right. And then as a Phonon player at that point, you'd be hoping to maybe catch them with a grasp, or maybe like if especially if it's turn one, your cross isn't going to do much. That's going to put you where you don't want to be. You're going to end up in the corner.
Right.
You could, you know, you can use your sweeps, which is good defensively, but then you're not threatening your big offensive ones. And like maybe that's when you'd throw you. That's where you're like, oh, maybe this is where I throw the focus. And then
Right.
later on, you're like, oh, was that the right choice?
Right. Should have veiled off. Like so, you might have won that strike, but maybe you've lost out on the overall game plan later.
Right. Your mid game might be a little rough.
Right. Gotcha.
Or maybe it was the right play. Like
Right.
it's one of those things you kind of just got to feel it out,
Yep.
depending on who you're playing against. Um, but the typical, like I'd say, especially from season 6, uh, this is an incredibly strong move into Phonon.
Right.
Oops.
Moving in with action compression and then assaulting for advantage
Right.
is kind of a strong play.
Just disadvantage in general. Yeah, season 6 typically doesn't like advantage.
Right.
Phonon in particular because she's not because her specials don't do damage.
Right.
Um,
And so
and
I guess like the general play pattern to do against Phonon is like use your turn well. Like
right.
use your like spend your turn doing more than she's spending her turn doing because her turn is strong.
Right. Her turn is always going to be strong because bare minimum it's +1 power, which throws
Right.
off a lot of numbers.
Right.
Um,
And
and
if 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 I'm the Phonon player, my job is to either make my turn as strong as possible, or as you've been saying this whole time, do stuff that makes them unable to spend their turn well.
right, make
Okay.
their turn uncomfortable.
Sure.
Like have them be like you typically if you're passing the turn without a strike, or even with a strike, when you pass the turn as phone on, you want to make sure they don't have a game plan. Like you
Right.
remember that. Make sure that they don't have this is the answer.
Right.
You want to make
They
them
might be able
have
to throw a mix up or something, but they don't have like their 100% guaranteed thing anymore.
right, right.
Right. Okay.
Um, and a lot of people like the advantage chains really make her sad.
Okay.
So like someone like Nanase, right? She can give
Yep.
herself minus speed, but if she's already at range 1, she can really get away with. She just is like bombing sweeps and focuses with advantage. Who cares? That's going to
She
be
can just take a lot of turns in a row.
right. And then Phonon goes at that point is probably just going to be wild swinging,
Right.
just to not lose out on a whole bunch of cards. And
Right.
hopefully, when it becomes her turn again, she can do something about it.
Okay.
Which is why looking at season 7, I don't have too much practice with Phonon into season 7. I am mildly concerned
Sure.
because
They have strong turns and they can cancel for a long time.
yep, their
Yep.
cancels are going to be so. Even if like I think my game plan into season 7 would be to just really keep them, just try to prevent as much gauge as possible, right? Which
Okay.
I think is the general game plan
Right.
into season 7 is just hope they don't have gauge, but there's a lot of like even Soul, right?
Sure.
He is effectively a key charge or something like that. So they put something into the gauge, and then now it's rough for you as a Phonon player because do you boost?
Right.
Is your boost going to be good enough against like a Roman cancel, right?
Right. Yeah.
Soul can just out of nowhere be like, okay, here's 10 damage.
Right. Right. And if that's what they're spending on your turn, now the pressure's on you because it's the reversal of what you're saying with Phonon. Because if
Hmm.
this whole time you're saying, all right, your turn's really good, make them have a bad turn, or at least make them have a turn that they can't compete with yours. Well,
Right.
all right, if you're fighting against someone whose turns are consistently as good as yours, or a player who's able to make their turns as consistently good as yours, now it's on you to
Right.
shore up your turns and make them run as efficiently as possible.
Right. Now you're shaking up. Now against season 7, I do predict myself exceeding a lot more.
Okay.
A lot earlier, just because it's probably going to turn into a slugfest. I might
Right.
not be boosting as much. Uh I'm just going to be going for raw power at that point.
Gotcha.
Um Maybe it's like I said, I haven't put too much into it. This is just me thinking about it.
Sure.
Um
But
because some people
that's the kind of flexibility that you need to have in order to deal with these matchups.
right, against season 7, for example, I might aggressively try to get this combo,
Right.
right? Because sure, like I can do that, and then I just throw Soul into the corner,
Right.
and then now I have breathing room,
Yeah, and you desperately need it because he's been pressuring you this whole time.
right? And now I can
Gotcha.
breathe, and then he spends a turn moving in. Maybe uh, what is because they would pull, but he doesn't really have too much here.
Oh,
I think I still have the advantage.
you're
They
talking about
can
area shift on
area
his
shift
cross, right?
on
Yeah,
cross,
yeah.
yeah.
I gotcha.
So they can do that. They do. I think they do have a run cancel as well.
Yeah, they do. It's on assault, I think. Yeah, they can get into like here and then cancel, and then
Right,
they're
which
still
is
threatening
fine.
you.
If it's on assault,
Sure.
we're cool with that.
Yeah, you don't because you don't want to give them advantage into you with their
Right.
assault. Right.
Because then
Okay.
at that point, like if they use assault to move in there, even if they cancel it, that makes tuning satisfaction
Yeah.
good. Like you're just gonna poke them out of range with that.
Right. Right.
It's
Right.
it's gonna be it's a very interesting thing. Well, I'm curious to see how it goes.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm looking forward to it because I'm hoping she stays in my kit. Uh,
In like
moving
your
forward.
tournament rotation.
Yeah, yeah. My current tournament rotation, last tournament I took. Well, I didn't take Phonon with me, but if I were to say my quote unquote best team is Chun Li, Tao Kaka, and Phonon.
Oh, cool.
Very, very movement positional people. And
Yeah.
last tournament I took Lin, Wagner, and then Tinker Knight of all people.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, which is
I just did a lesson on Tinker Knight with D last night.
he's very fun.
Yeah.
He's a very fun character.
Yeah.
But yeah, Phonon she can be very toxic if your
Yep.
opponent especially doesn't know what they're doing against her.
Yep.
Um, I have. It's not uncommon for me to finish a game 20 plus, just
Yeah.
again like for the first time because they're just like
They don't
they
know what
don't
to do.
see a lot of the things coming.
Yeah.
Um,
So make sure when you're playing her that you either never want to speak to your opponent again or you're on very good terms with them and you know that they'll be okay afterward.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, like I don't. If I'm playing against someone new, I don't like to bring Phonon out
Yeah.
because it can create very, very
Yeah.
feels bad moments where it's like,
Pl-
oh, I'm going to do this, and you just no.
play
Like they spend
her
the whole game playing
yeah.
here, and yeah,
Play her into your best friend or your worst enemy,
mm-hmm, yep.
pretty much. All right.
And then
Cool.
since we mentioned earlier, we're in a tournament. That sucks.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's where we're at.
All bets are off now. Now you're playing for money.
Yep. But yeah, I think her biggest weakness though is like very aggressive, uh,
Right.
like in your face, especially like Wild Swing. I think looking at let's mentioning season 7, I think Leo is going to be very strong in the Phonon.
Sure.
Uh, 'Cause he's just going to get to range 2 and then just
And just
he's just
never give you a chance to breathe.
right. It's just going to be
Yep.
constant. Unless I get a lucky, like at that point, you're fishing for like against Leo. I think I fish for EX guidance, and then I just jam it
Right.
and just hope for the best, and
Yep.
then put him at range, put him at 4,
And just
start throwing
try desperately to keep him there.
right, keep him
Yep.
back there as much as possible. Hopefully, he reverts, and you breathe a little bit and reshuffle and hope for the best. But that is
Yep.
one thing I didn't talk about is reshuffling with Phonon.
Oh yeah.
Um, it's very season 6 is very weird in that regard because like a lot of these cards are all really good, right? But the problem with season 6 in a lot of ways is they might not be good right there, but maybe you're only 1 or 2 stops away. So do you pitch them? When do you reshuffle?
Right.
You kind of got to just feel it out. If you have no, if you look and your guidance extensions are down, maybe 3 of your tuning are down, you got no sweeps left, you know, you're just kind of both your resonance and your both of these are gone. Things
Right.
to consider. That's
Right.
probably when I would reshuffle.
Sure.
Um, like when you just look at what's left in the deck and you're like, just reshuffle.
Right.
Unless,
At some point it's probably going to happen though.
right, right. But I will say I've never been at a point where like it's always been a question. It's never been like now is when I reshuffle. Like Plague Knight, for example. If
Sure.
both Castle Crashes are down and like all of your chain reactions or whatever are down, just
Right.
reshuffle. If you
Time
got
to
no ultras
reshuffle
left,
right now.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's turn 3, we're reshuffling. I've seen it happen.
Right. Sure.
uh
Well, your tournament scene is Faust's, right?
yes, yep,
Yeah.
yep.
I can't imagine why you'd have Plague Knight experience going into Faust.
Yep, he's really good at it. I have
Yeah.
another friend of mine. His team is Plague Knight, new, and typically Rio. Is what it'll take, but new and Plague Knight are his 2 big ones.
Right.
And it is usually I ban new because it's his best character. And
Right.
although sometimes like Tao's really good in the new because she can just get in there and deal with it. But yeah, you ever played against a good new? It's rough.
Absolutely. I'm looking
And he
forward to
has
that. I'm looking forward to that lesson too, so I can learn what to do against her.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
get up close, get into range 3,
Right.
2 and 3. But if you want to see the ultimate new flex, is what's his new can boost for range, and then grasp you on turn 1. He
Yeah.
will purposely throw away grasp on turn 1 to pay for the
Oh,
boost, and you're like,
that's
oh
cool.
man,
All
and he'll
right. So
smile when he does it.
that is like now it's personal, right? Now
Mhm.
it's reputational damage.
Yeah, because he's like, there's still nothing you can do about this.
Right. All right. So
Which yeah,
I can hear us getting a little bit off topic here.
yes, yes,
And because it turns out Exceed is fun to talk about.
very
Um,
much so.
is there anything else you want to cover about Phonon? We're pretty deep into the lesson at this point. My timer says that we're well over 2 hours. Um,
Wow.
yeah. Incredible information though. So definitely no problem. There's a reason it's called Excess Exceed.
Yeah,
Anything else
yeah,
you want
for
to
real.
cover? Anything else you want to cover before I sign off though?
I think we've covered everything that I can think of offhand. Of course, I'm sure when we're done, I'll figure something out. But
Right.
we
We'll have to
covered
record a 3-part series on Phonon on all the stuff we missed.
right, exactly.
Right. Cool.
I think we have hit everything that I can think of.
Awesome.
Um, yeah. Other than I think I briefly mentioned Rangers. Going back to
Right.
new is very strong in the Phonon because, like I said before, Phonon can strike at range 5. New does strike at range 5. Right.
Right.
So
And someone who's more comfortable at range than her can pressure her just like they could up close.
right, and now Phonon does not like that.
Sure.
So that is one way, and as Phonon to deal with that is that's when you would use your assault to move in
Yeah, to
or
actually
something like
advance
that.
and push the game state towards a slightly
Right.
closer range.
Or
Okay.
or even respect in, yeah. So like
Right.
she really likes being at 3-4, sometimes 5, depending on who she's playing against.
Right.
And at the same time, don't be afraid of just if you need to, just push them out.
Right.
And then if they can, or I guess in some like new, pull them in. Right. Just put them where they don't want to be. You can recover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah,
So
that'll make sense. I'm looking forward to giving her a shot.
yeah, go for
Now
it.
now that I've got some more info on her, I will report back and tell you how many feelings I hurt.
I would love to know.
Yeah. All right.
She's a very fun character to play, but she can be very rough to play against, especially if if you don't know what you're doing.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, so hopefully this guide will help some people get a sense of what they're in for when they're fighting her too.
I certainly hope so.
Yeah. Dark, thank you so much for your time and for your expertise. I really do appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun talking to you.
Absolutely, I had a lot of fun here as well.
Yeah, I'm so glad, and I'm looking forward to talking to you again for another one later. And for everybody watching, thank you so much for your time, and good luck out there. And I'll see you later. Bye, everybody.
Take care.